Yeah.
Well, first of all, let me tell you thanks for coming. And one kind of sad thing that the person who organized this meeting, Dina Zaretsky, she's originally from Russia, but she lives, I think, in Uganda, in Africa, and she just got sick today, and she sent us a message that unfortunately she couldn't participate. And well, I still hope that maybe she later can join us. I don't know. Maybe she will get better a little bit. But anyway, a big thanks to her for organizing this event. And so the way, first of all, the history of this event. Anna and I, we make a presentation in different days at the Bakhtinian conference in Saransk in Russia. It was a hybrid conference. It was online and like face-to-face, and we were online. And what's interesting was that, and that was not planned like that, but somehow our presentations were communicating to each other. And it was not a plan, because if it were planned, we will try to put them on the same day at least. But they were not on the same day. They were in different days. But in a way, some people who came to Anna's presentation, they referred to my presentation. And that's, my presentation was first, few days ahead. So Dina was thinking about to create this, put them together actually. So for us to discuss. So my presentation is more like theoretical presentation, and Anna's presentation become more, I wouldn't say practical, but more grounded. So there's
a case study.
Kind of, yeah, the practices about which I was talking about, in a way, theoretically, is presented and open for discussion. So in a way, that's why our two presentations are kind of complementary, because I'm providing kind of more theoretical overview of this and what it's coming from. And Anna kind of found interesting practice to actually analyze from that kind of framework that I presented. So this is the history. And I don't know if you had opportunity or not to look at the presentations, our presentations and discussions that happened after that or not, but they're very long. So what we decided to do for people who, let me actually ask you, did you watch that? Did you read? I put also my article that, no, good. Okay, that's nothing wrong. So in this case, we created like a brief presentations, like my presentation and Anna's, and then we can discuss that. And I'm saying it's brief in the sense that if you're interested about any part of that, we can zoom in on that, because I don't know what part you will be interested in that. So this is how the whole thing is. So first, it will be my presentation about the theoretical part, and Anna's about like really going really kind of dirty hands-on in a way about the practice that I'm actually discussing. Okay, so, and again, it was not planned. It was interesting that it was not planned from the beginning like that, but it's really happened. And people pointed out to us, wait a minute, it's looked like...
both of you are synchronized anyway.
Yeah, right. But it was not visible to us, that synchronization, which is...
We do collaborate a lot in talking about issues and you know, like conceptualizing things, but we did not coordinate what presentations we are going to do.
No, not only that, but when we wrote proposals, even at that level, we didn't think about that. So it was strange, interesting thing. And hi, Abram, I'm sorry.
There's no coincidence.
Yeah, it's probably deeper than coincidence, but it's interesting that we didn't reflect ourselves about that. Yes. Okay, so let us start, and I will start sharing screen. I actually did a very traditional PowerPoint presentation. The reason I'm doing that is just because there are too many things in treat that more like exactly outline for to zoom in on anything that's interesting for you. So think about that. This is like a menu, like you're going to a restaurant. This is menu, and you can feel free to say, "Oh, I want like tacos, or I want sardines, or I want shish kebab." But I don't want other things. Anyway, let me tell you what's the project for me. Become an interesting project that I become interested in that. I'm very much attracted to Bakhtin, and as you might know, but he was a philosopher, Russian philosopher of dialogism. First of all, for me, that's my Bakhtin, because I know that Bakhtin may be different for different people, and also that my Bakhtin again focused on primarily on dialogue. In the broader sense. And another thing is that Bakhtin was, of course, a literary scholar. So his philosophy, he grounded his philosophy in literary analysis, not in education. Although, again, he educated himself, of course, and he wrote at least one article on education that I found, and it was translated in English. So my goal was, so this is my interesting endeavor. I thought, what if I really abstract like what I mean by Bakhtinian dialogue and think about what kind of educational regime promotes that dialogue? Okay, so this is what was my plan. Oops, how to move? I thought okay, it's working. So let me set the problem. Where is the problem is? The problem is that, how I see that. Bakhtin was very interesting. When he needed an example of what he called excessive monologism, he used this example from education, which is interesting. So education for him represents an extreme form of monologism. And he, for example, this is his quote from a book on Dostoevsky. In essence, excessive monologism knows only a single mode of cognitive interaction among consciousnesses. Someone who knows and possesses the truth instructs someone who is ignorant of it and in error. That is, it's the interaction of the teacher and the pupil, which it follows can be only a pedagogical exchange. Of course, one can argue that this is, of course, description of very conventional education, but it's possible to ask many questions about that. So there are many educators and educationalists, I would call, who are attracted to Bakhtin. And I'm going to just check that attraction, a few attractions, but also I want to focus also on contradictions in even my endeavor. So first of all, just quick attractions. I put 3 attractions, and of course could be more indifferent from them. One attraction that meaning making is dialogic process, according to Bakhtin, which means that education, in order to be meaningful, has to be dialogic. Also, Bakhtin talked about that. What does it mean to humanize things? And he said that dialogue humanizes our life, and it's through dialogue we become, in a way, humans as a tendency, not as a given, but as how he said, as assignment for ourselves to be better than who we are. And the third point, I would say that for education to be deepened, it must be unfinalizable and critical. That's another attraction, which is again coming from Bakhtin. And again, there could be more others. I just focused on that. The contradictions in my in my endeavor, contradiction, like Bakhtin, this is what the big question in this quote: can education be as a practice? Cannot be dialogic, truly dialogic in Bakhtinian sense. Again, with this keeping eye on the fact that Bakhtin actually saw education as a good example of extreme monologism. Another thing, can this notion of regime, and regime is a political term, it's organization of politics, and politics is imposition on other people, particular imposition of desire, values, actions, and so on and so forth. And is it compatible with the notion of dialogue? And the third kind of contradiction between education and regime. Some people say education should not also, education itself should not nothing to do with the politics. My approach with these three contradictions that kind of in my title, I would say that the contradictions are really exist, but in my view, I see them as tensions, unavoidable tensions, and it could be very productive to explore that. But my take it right now on that this contradiction, they not cancel each other in a way, in the sense that from the fact that politics is contradict to dialogue, it doesn't mean that dialogue can exist without politics, for example, and so on and so forth. The fact that politics contradict notion of education, again, it doesn't mean education can live without politics. Also, dialogue has educational value and so on and so forth. So I see them as a very important tensions. I don't want to dismiss them, but they are not canceled in a way each other. That's another story. That's not the center of my presentation. This is just a problem. Okay, so this is the features that I see in Bakhtinian dialogue. Again, this is you should. Although I put the Bakhtinian dialogue, it's the Bakhtinian dialogue according to Eugene. So I want to kind of warn you that I'm not claiming that what I'm saying is objective truth. What I'm saying is my subjective truth, my pravda. So this is how I see Bakhtin's notion of dialogue. So first of all, I see that as plural. Maybe I'll put them, first of all of them, and then I go deep in each of them. So one thing that I see what does mean Bakhtinian dialogue is plurality of unmergeable consciousness with equal rights. And in a moment I explain what it is through the Bakhtinian quotes. I think Bakhtin will explain it himself much better than me what it is. The second thing that for me is Bakhtinian dialogue, it's an author with unique and unpredictable voice, uncalculatable. The third thing is transcendence of participants' social roles, statuses, identities in the problematic dialogue. The fourth thing is deconstructive critical dialogue of spoil sports. And the fifth one is ethical ontological nature of dialogue. Again, this is my claim that what Bakhtinian dialogue is about. At least how I see it. This is for me resonates things. So let's jump on the first one. Okay, I don't know why I'm doing all of this. So this one quote from Bakhtin, again from his book on Dostoevsky. It's I want, unlike some other people, I see Bakhtinian dialogue not so much between Dostoevsky as an author of the book, polyphonic novels, and his characters. Oops, Vida, can you mute yourself, please? Okay, thank you. So it's not between author and the characters, but among characters. That's for me the dialogue is. So Bakhtin wrote that at the beginning of his book, this is how he comes to the notion of polyphonic novel, a plurality of independent and unmerged voices and consciousnesses. A genuine polyphony of fully valid voices is in the fact the chief characteristic of Dostoevsky's novels. What unfolds in his work is not multitude of characters and fates in a single objective world, illuminated by single authorial consciousness, rather a plurality of consciousness with equal rights, and each with its own world, combined but not merged in the unity of the event. And specifically, I was thinking about what rights he's talking about. He never kind of unpacked, or at least I couldn't find him unpacking this notion of equal rights. And this is my attempts to start doing that. Oops. Why is it so difficult? Come on. Wow. Oh, okay, good. It just, Zoom makes it slow, I guess. So the first right, it's to be taken seriously by other participants, to treat voices seriously. And what does it mean to take it seriously? It means to provoke and to be ready to reply to that person in the serious way, not to dismiss, not to mock about that, not to remain silent, not to say how stupid it is, but to take it seriously what other person said and reply to that. It means could be agreement or disagreement. It doesn't matter, but it should be taken seriously. And I just want to say that it's actually not what's going on in a conventional education. The words of the students are not taken seriously as something that you need to reply with your heart and mind. And this is what Bakhtin was talking about, conventional education, how much it's about either affirmation that I agree with you, it means you're right, correct, or you are in fault, you're making an error, that's it. And there is no, that's not taken seriously. It means my right on truth is higher than the teacher, it's higher than the students. The second right I was thinking is to introduce one's own interest and concerns into the dialogue, and to change, interrupt, remain silent, drop a topic, or leave the dialogue temporarily or entirely at any time. Again, so the ownership of the dialogue does not belong to anyone or belongs to everybody, if you think about from that point of view. And so dialogue cannot be imposed, again, which is a big contradiction in conventional schools. The third right that I pick up is to right to disagree and remain in disagreement, or to be misunderstood or half understood, misinterpreted, or remain unknown. This principle coming from the Bakhtin's insistence that consciousness never can be merged or never fully transparent. They're also never fully opaque, but they're never fully transparent. And that means that you don't know another person, never fully know another person, only partially. So this is kind of rights that I pick up. So another one, it's author with unique and unpredictable, oops, why I'm coming here? Oh, sorry for that, I kind of, okay. Oh, there is a wrong link. There is a wrong link. Okay, there is a very wonderful quote about that. About that, what does mean voice? And the voice, Bakhtin said, the voice people not talking about with the timbre, with accent, with this, but they really speak with their fates, with their reputations. So, and they can be calculatable, and the voices are unique. And again, I could have shown you a very good, nice quote, if not the wrong link there. Okay, let's see, maybe this one will be, yeah, this one, I'm happier with this one. So this is very important things, which is big things in the United States. I don't know how much it's in your country, but this is actually where it goes against this notion of social justice, for example, because from Bakhtinian defining dialogue, it transcends any social role statuses, identities in problematic dialogue. Let me provide the quotes in within this, what Bakhtin was said, that in Dostoevsky, the adventure plot is combined with the posing of profound and acute problems. And it is, in addition, placed wholly at the surface of the idea. It places a person in extraordinary positions that expose and provoke him. It connects him and makes him collide with other people under unusual and unexpected conditions, precisely for the purpose of testing the idea and the man of the idea, that is, testing man in man. A combination of adventurism over the Bulwar's noble sort, with idea with problematic dialogue. It's made meaningful even surmounted in Dostoevsky through the consistent polyphonism of his work. He's constantly talking about that in polyphonic Dostoevsky novel, people losing their, when they get into dialogue, they are not anymore defined by their identity, social class, gender, or anything then. They, using Buber's, again, terminology, it's like the meeting man with man, naked, almost naked there. And so this is very important aspect of Bakhtinian dialogue in my view, in my reading of that. Now, deconstructive critical dialogue of sports. This is a quote first from the Morrison, who is a scholar, Gary Morrison, who is a scholar, Bakhtinian scholar, he's a philologist. And he said in Dostoevsky polyphonic dialogue, the truth becomes dialogically tested and forever testable. So there is nothing, no kind of stone unturned can be in dialogue. It doesn't mean that everything will become immediately turned. It's impossible. It will be always partial. But the dialogue doesn't know in a way, that's why it's unfinalizable. It doesn't know the end. Or in terms of Bakhtin himself, the most important characteristic of Menipia, it's a genre, as a genre, is the fact that it's bold and unrestrained. Use of the fantastic and adventure is internally motivated, justified by and devoted to purely identical and philosophical end. The creation of extraordinary situations for provoking and testing of philosophical idea, a discourse, a truth, embodied in the image of wise person, the seeker of this truth. We emphasize that fantastic here serves not for the positive embodiment of the truth, but as a mode of searching after truth, provoking it, and most important, testing it. Okay, and the last on my list is this focus on ethico-ontological nature of dialogue. This is very important, will be for Anna to pick up on that. So Dostoevsky neither knows nor perceives nor represents the idea in itself in Platonic sense, nor ideal existence as phenomenologists understand it. For Dostoevsky, there are no ideas, no thoughts, no positions, which belongs to no one, which exist in themselves. And there are some other, this is actually back to the definition of the voice. Definition of the voice that includes height, range, timbre, aesthetic category, lyrics, dramatic, etc. It also includes person's worldview and fate. A person enters in dialogue as integral voice. It represents it not only with its thoughts, but with its fate and with entire individuality. And in Dostoevsky, consciousness never gravitates towards itself, but always found in intense relations with another consciousness. Every experience, every thought or character is internally dialogic, adorned with the polemic, filled with struggle, or on the contrary, open to inspiration from outside itself. But it is not only in case of concentrated simply on its own object. It's accompanied by continual sidewise glance at another person. Oops. I want to say about this voice, unique and unpredictable voice, the quote is there, as far as I remember, supposed to be like that in Dostoevsky's novel, Dostoevsky is not interested in describing person from outside position, but the whole focus about how a person perceive the world and themselves. So this is very important. This is what it means to be author of the statement about the world and about yourself. And that's very important. So this is how I was thinking what Bakhtinian dialogue for me is. And I started thinking about how to support that. Of course, this dialogue can happen at any place. That's what Bakhtin said. It can happen in any, even in any very oppressive, under every oppressive conditions. But of course, from the fact that it can happen under oppressive conditions, it doesn't mean that we should create these oppressive conditions. So I was thinking reverse, how to facilitate it? What conditions, political conditions, educationally political conditions, which is what I call regime, would support that type of dialogue. So this is what I found. First of all, it should be the situation of self-education. You know, you cannot have consciousness with equal rights in the context of paternalism, Kantian educational paternalism, when teacher or authority or state knows better for the students that they, first of all, they must to study something, what they should study, how they should study, with whom they should study, where they should study, and so on and so forth. That paternalism is against, it really suppresses Bakhtinian dialogue. Bakhtinian dialogue based on the meeting of the free consciousness, when the people are free to meet or not to meet, to engage in dialogue and not to engage, to define what it's about, to change the direction, to move away from each other at any time. And to, of course, to define their own education. And this is what the notion of self-education. So it's under educational regime that supports self-education. This is educational regime that supports Bakhtinian dialogue. Another one, this is term, if you don't understand it, don't worry, because I invented that. So, or at least maybe I co-invented with somebody, but I didn't know about that. So what does it mean, sim-deduct? I was actually coming from another thing. I was thinking about what self-education, what form self-education can take. And I came with the 5 forms. First of all, autodidact, which is well known. It's a study by yourself. It's a solo study. But solo study will involve dialogue with yourself and dialogue with the text or any other medium, but not without live people and not without any coordination with other people. You can do whatever you want, just it. And autodidact. The next one is sim-deduct, which you study with equal peers. Equal means that nobody has any particular role or any particular stable obligations. People, the roles, they can be roles, but they're dynamic, situational, and also they're kind of relational. So, for example, if, like, say, I know something, and let's say somebody like Anna doesn't know, like, you know, it's for me to be as a peer teacher for Anna, she needs to accept that. Because she might reject it and say, you know what, Eugene, I don't want to hear you. I want to study it myself, or actually, I don't even not interested in that altogether. You know? Next one is autodidact with advisement. So there is advisement from somebody else about, so I want to study something, but I came to Amnon for advice, like what should I study, how I should do that, and so on and so forth. And then I can do it myself. The 4th one, again, this is my invention. That Greek word doesn't exist. Adigas deduct. I don't know whether or not I'm pronouncing it correctly. Adigas means led by somebody else, not autos by self, not together with somebody, but led by somebody else, which is teaching. And in the sense of self-education, it's conditional teaching. So, for example, I came to Diana and say, please teach me about this, this, and that. But as soon as I'm not liking what Diana teaching or how I'm teaching, first of all, I can negotiate it with her, but at any time I can say, goodbye, Diana, I'm done. Thank you. You're not anymore my teacher. You're only my teacher because I need your help and on my conditions. So it's conditional teaching. And the 5th one, which is very bizarre, because form of self-education, very bizarre, because it's called auto-paternalism, which is, it's contradiction in terms. I just want to say, paternalism is somebody limits your freedom because that person thinks that he or she knows more better for you, what's good for you than you are. And auto-paternalism is kind of almost like misnomer, but it is the phenomena. And in one of my latest article, I'm actually describing in full that through the voice of my student. It's actually you coming to the students and say, force me to do things. Okay. So again, it's conditional because at any time, if it's self-education, that student can say, you know what, I don't need anymore, you're forcing me. That's it. But that's form, I still argue that it's form of self-education. Now, why is it in the red? Because out of all these forms, I argue this is the only syndidact it fully supports Bakhtinian dialogue. Why? Because remember, he talks about consciousness with equal rights. In all these three others, there is no equal rights. There is advisement. It means the consciousness is higher than the consciousness of the student. That's one thing. Of course, in autodidact, Adigas didact, its teacher has role, special role, and out of paternalism even more than that, even stronger. Another reason why it's not, it's they not support Bakhtinian, these three. I'm talking about these three, is because Bakhtinian dialogue, there is transcendence of roles or identities of the people. There is no orientations, in other words. Anna and I will talk about the teacher orientation or student orientation. There is no orientation whatsoever. In Bakhtinian dialogue, man, sorry for the sexist term in English, means man, but in Russian, it's translation from Russian. In Russian, it's not sexist overtone on that. So and there is, or better probably, person with person, maybe better to translate like that. When there is no roles, there is no man and woman, there is no black and white, there is no Israeli or American, Jews or Arab, there is no Christians, there is nothing, all of them collapsing. It's really person-to-person needs. So why is it autodidact not a part of Bakhtinian dialogue? Because again, in Bakhtin, you know, dialogue with the text, there is no equal consciousness. The consciousness of the author in the text absolutely not equal. And Socrates actually put a very good critique of that, of literacy. From Socrates' point of view, literacy kills real, genuine dialogue because you cannot ask text. Text cannot, you can ask text, but it will remain either either silent or stupid because it can only repeat that. It cannot bring something new because, you know, you're talking, there is no real person behind that text who can answer to you. And that's why autodidact is not conditions for the to fully scale Bakhtinian dialogue. It's not a condition for that. Okay, so next one is presents itself in dialogue. And this is David Sabe, very recently in his dissertation, analyzing Bakhtin again, bringing this notion of presencing self in dialogue. It means making, David Sabe observed interesting phenomena, studying actually schooling, including himself, his own discourse in school, as a teacher, but also a student, people hiding for abstractions. This is what Bakhtin talks theoretism. They are not ontological. You don't understand why they're saying that, how it's rooted in their lives. It becomes like general universal statements. It's like Kantian statements. And the dialogue, Bakhtinian dialogue, should get almost torn apart of this type of discourse. And again, reveal yourself, how your beliefs, your values, your perception of the world rooted in your life. Where are you? Which your responsibilities? Why are you taking this, for what you take responsibility? Where are you standing and why are you standing for that? Where is your truth, personal truth, or in Russian, pravda? Where is your pravda? And this is what David Sabe says, presents itself in dialogue. Another thing, so this is Bakhtin talks about, interestingly enough, in his his book on Dostoevsky, and he said, where is dialogue happen mostly? It's in Dostoevsky. And he brings this notion of agora, which is a Greek marketplace where it's very hetero, I don't know how to put the word, activity, discourses, people happen. Like it was not only marketplace, it was the place for the government. It's a place where people meet for making justice. There is art exposure. There is people for art. There is where the philosophers met. There was people met for learning from each other. Places for gossiping. And this is foreigners will come. This is a place to meet strangers, not only strangers within Athens, but strangers in the world. Because the people of the stranger, you can meet there, find strangers. It's a places where people freely come and go, and they can listen, they can participate, they can jump on that. So it's a very interesting place. And this is the place that Bakhtin said, which facilitates happening this dialogue, what he's talking about. And that's why, in a way, through the literary tropes, Dostoevsky created opportunities for his characters to engage in this dialogue by recreating this agora through the literary means. So, but again, it seems very interesting to think how this agora might look like from educational point of view. So this is my conclusion. In conclusion, I want to conclude by problematizing both Bakhtinian dialogue from education point of view and this pedagogical regime. So, so my first problematization is, should the Bakhtinian dialogic educationalists, so people who are attracted to Bakhtinian dialogue, people like me, fully commit to Bakhtinian dialogue or partially? Why? Under what conditions? To what else? If it's not Bakhtinian dialogue, to what else? For example, let me give what else it might be. Maybe self-education, because self-education is bigger than Bakhtinian dialogue. You can see that. And my second question, should Bakhtinian dialogic educationalists, again, people like me, fully commit to educational regime of Bakhtinian dialogue, or partially, or why, under what conditions, to what else? Let me again think about that as we bring the notion of the self-education. Self-education, it's bigger than Bakhtinian dialogue, but there is another thing. Bakhtinian dialogue has the idea of that it's a pluralistic, it's inherently pluralistic. So it's actually, in a way, supports non-Bakhtinian dialogue education because it's pluralistic, which means that that regime should be open for other forms of education that is not necessarily based on Bakhtinian dialogue. And this is what I was bringing, that this exactly that I start talking about this intrinsic pluralism of Bakhtinian dialogue and its pedagogical regime, which means it can think about that. If it says it's self-education, it itself the students should decide their own education. Well, the students might decide not to value dialogue or Bakhtinian dialogue in particular, and it should be okay. So this is what that I want to finish on that. And so maybe next part we can have some questions about that, or comments, or whatever, and then we will switch to, after that, to Anna, when in a way we will focus on the example of, I would argue, Bakhtinian dialogue in education, and we will watch video of that and discuss that, what you think about that. So first questions, comments, disagreements.
Who can be the partners for dialogue? What is the condition to be a friend for, or to be a partner to dialogue?
First of all, it should be an equal partner from this kind of, from my kind of view on this.
Equally what meaning? What do you mean by equal?
Equal, by the way, it's very simple. Like if you want to engage, you raise the question right now. And that question, first of all, is very interesting for me. So the person with whom you will be in dialogue is one who is interested to, you ask question to be interested in replying to this question, to engage with you. And when I'm engaging you, I'm not engaging you as an expert on anything. I'm just honestly considering this question, what it means for me and how I would reply to that. And this is my reply to you. I'm not saying, oh, such a stupid question, or you know what, I don't want to answer to that. I will be not a partner of your dialogue. That means I'm saying goodbye, but maybe Diana or Vida or Abram or Lei, they maybe be partner of your dialogue. For the be partner of dialogue to become interested in each other, and in both in ideas and in the person, because it's much bigger than the question you ask.
But is it possible that somebody that expert in some subject would be, it will not be non-hierarchical as you wish to be? I mean, still we have some position or some unequal situation.
You know, this is not equal or not equal. We're not equal to each other, because we're different people. We're unique. In this case, if you're unique, we cannot even compare to each other. And what Bakhtin talks about, equal rights, not
equal rights. Equal rights. I'm talking about if you're expert.
Right. Now, my kind of in terms of expertise, I think again you're asking, in my view, very, very deep questions. In terms of expertise, in my view, expertise is not individual property. I'm always know with other people. So the fact that you don't know something, it means my expertise collapsing with you. It's not collapsing with me, myself, but it's collapsing with you. Like, for example, I speak Russian rather well. Но если я начну с вами сейчас говорить по-русски, вы же меня не понимаете. Анна, может быть, меня немножко понимает, но вы меня не понимаете. То есть мое знание русского языка коллапс. То есть она kaput. I'm just what you probably understand more or less what I'm saying. I was switched to Russian, you could switch to Hebrew, and I speak to you in Russian, but my Russian collapsing with you because you couldn't understand that. In this case, with you, I don't know Russian.
Yeah.
And in order to, if we want to engage with Russian, we need to recreate this Russian together. And I'm not anymore expert in this case because I become like person who couldn't speak. And we can, so the same thing, this is kind of a metaphor to some degree. It's the same thing I was talking about. I had a really interesting situation when I was engaged in dialogue with little kids about adding numbers, like 2 + 2. And my knowledge about arithmetic collapsed with them. And by the way, it collapsed with extremely interesting things that they puzzled me, that I still don't know sometimes how to answer to that, to issues that they brought together. We brought together. I said like, wow, it's such a deep things that arithmetics. I didn't know. I thought it's just simple. 2 + 2 equal 4. You know, but then together with them, I become challenged by that. By the lack of expertise.
Okay, asta be Russian.
We don't know. Probably only I could understand that, but
Really, I'm not sure the whole thing you could understand. You kind of becoming Russian.
No. I was not saying about you.
Eugene, well, what do you include? What do you include in your voice? What does it mean? What does it include your voice, okay? Your voice, what does it include?
Yes.
From Bakhtin, and this is the quote that unfortunately you didn't see, I could actually maybe find for you. Bakhtin again decided what the voice is. And the voice is, first of all, it's a person's perception and vision of the world and themselves. That's how Bakhtin defines the voice.
What about emotion, and what about
of course. When you say perception, when perception, and it's actually
heuristic, for example.
Amnon, let me tell you, in Russian, the Russian word that unfortunately it's impossible to translate in English fully. The Russian word is feeling of the world. When I say perception of the world, it's not perception, it's feeling of the world. And in Russian, it's one word for that. It's a very beautiful word. I really like that. And Bakhtin using that. But it's translated мироощущение.
Мироощущение.
Yeah, and it's again, it's difficult to translate in English because perception is not the right, because its perception is too cold.
So if you take its part, what does it include? If you take its parts, what does it include? What are the parts? Perception.
It includes, for example, what you like, what you don't like about the world. That's part of that. It will include. It's like all your biases, and biases not necessarily a negative word, but this is what makes you alive. Like how a live organism is different from the dead organism, or not organism, or the thing. A live thing versus dead thing. And then a life is not a thing even.
My identity.
No, it's not identity. No, it's completely not identity.
Okay.
It's about your biases. You're attracted to something and you repel to something else, and you're indifferent to something else. This one, it doesn't know these biases. It's because it's different. And what makes something alive is to be full of these biases. And the biases are very strong and they're very emotional in a way. They're very hot. They were not cold. They're not cognitive that. They're primordial in a way. This is like bacteria. What the bacteria makes alive.
Fundamental beliefs.
Moving away from something and tries to get to something else.
Fundamental beliefs, like I believe in God, I'm Jewish, and Muslim.
And passionate. It's not like yes, but what you invest in. Like I hate that. I love. This is what it's coming from. This is what Bakhtin. Again, this is what Russian word мироощущение.
It have to be explicit in the dialogue. This is a condition for being explicit, or just by demanding, or what?
Well, it's not explicit because it's expressed in your voice. You might not even know that you're passionate about that yourself, but you expressing that through
I think
your voice.
Is it important to the other side or to the other?
Absolutely. I'm not. Why not use the word subjectivity or something else but voice? For me, voice is how you appear to other and yourself. It is your presence. That's that concept, new concept maybe of presency. Now, for instance, in the world, we see material things with our senses, but we don't see other people as subjects. We have to feel them through what their voice is, raised to themselves. And sometimes you talk and you say something that it surprises yourself because you raise the voice first time even for yourself. So it's like appearance in the human world. Yes, Abram.
Yep.
Another way that I understand it, or that I'm interpreting this, is so each of us has our own kind of key questions that we want to ask, and I'm kind of like, are they going to bring up the topic that I'm curious about, that I can speak to, that I can connect to, the problems that kind of motivate my thinking? Whereas, for example, the questions that Amnon was just asking now, I was a little disconnected from, and I was curious to see how it played out because it was an area that I didn't understand, that I wasn't already oriented towards. But yeah, but I have my own question, and I'd like to ask a follow-up question. But I was just trying to clarify this point, because it's like it connects.
And Abram, also important things.
Characters are all just they're all motivated by their own.
And Abram, part of your interest in Amnon, where he's coming from, that he has that question. Like you don't have that question, but he has that question. In your life, you're not coming from that. This is not your passion. There's no your biases that generate that question. But there is something that generates, and you would like to know. Well, I would like to know about. That's very important part of that, to know where it's coming from in the Amnon life that this question emerged. But go ahead, Abram. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna just type it in there. Yeah, of course I'm interested in others and I'm interested in what other people are saying, but it's just that my own voice orients what I'm more susceptible to hear and what I can contribute. I'm trying to find my way to plug in, sort of thing. Like in Dostoevsky's characters, they're not necessarily just in response to each other, but they're always kind of looking to figure out their voice in that way. Like, what is it, their orienting problem? But my question, I really like the sim-didactic term, Eugene. And I recently had a chance to look at the Saibi piece, and that brought up, I also really liked that more practical look of an educationalist trying to do something like Bakhtinian dialogue. But throughout my question to that, but my question to you, I guess in some ways it's where you're going with your conclusions, like your conclusion is just to ask something like this question, which I want to ask of you, but it's like, why should we promote Bakhtinian sim-didactic dialogue rather than other educational ends? And the reason I come back to that question, which is really just a variation on your conclusion questions, is that I feel like there's another embedded question. To answer that, I think we need to understand, what does that get us? Because that part of it's not clear to me. What do we get by doing more Bakhtinian dialogue than other things that are not in that realm of the good sim-didactic Bakhtinian dialogue? Like, what are the ends? What does it produce? Or what, you know?
Well, again, this is a very good question. And this is, again, my answer on August 16 at 11 o'clock exactly, or in the Eastern time. This is my answer right now. I think part of that very important thing is, for me, it's coming from this idea of what doesn't be human, and humanization of the life, of our life. And part of this some kind of Bakhtin answer is that humanization means dialogization, creating dialogue about our life, and his type of dialogue about our life, about with naked people, with dropping out all of this our pretenses, which is social roles and so on and so forth, and to get together and to figure out like what the hell we're doing, why we're doing that, what behind that, and why we like what we're doing that, and why we don't like something else. And that's the big part. Or speaking the same thing, articulating, in my view, the same thing through the different characters of Socrates, that's coming from Plato in Apology. An apology that I want to just remind you, it was a court or investigation of the Socrates' crimes, and his reply to that is he was charged with the crimes for which he eventually was killed. by the Greek court, and he replied to his kind of big reply was that the unexamined life is not worth living. And that's, in a way, I think, a big, for me, attractions. And I think when Bakhtin talked about humanization, I think it's, in a way, it's the same expression of Socratic motto. And again, this motto in itself is not without problems, but this is kind of my answer. I don't know what you think about that, how it feels to you, or do you have some other answers to that?
I think I would just, as you were giving that answer, I think the conversation about what a voice is sort of started speaking to me as like, maybe that is the answer. Maybe it's about cultivating individuals' voices. They can't be cultivated except in groups, because you need to know what your particular path or your particular interests are and how they resonate and what they do are. So I think that's another possibility, is that another description of what humanization is like finding your motivating stories and what and how they lighten up the world and interest you in things, and how they connect to others, where they fit in the puzzle, where they fit in the polyphony or something. I don't know.
Yeah, for me, it's also, you know, when Bhakti says equals rights of consciousnesses. Voice in that sense, your own voice, makes you also understand who you are. And if you only have consciousnesses of other people to whom you listen and not your own voice to be equal with them, then you may know them, but you don't know yourself. So, so you appear as everybody appears as a subjectivity to themselves and the others at the same moment of being equal to raise the voice and be taken seriously as something that's legitimately there and interesting to other people and can bring their own concerns. And you may not even know what they are until you start raising them. They are inarticulate, and in our ways of how we understand ourselves, we have to articulate. Yes, we talk to ourselves too, but we never can escape ourselves unless we have somebody else to bounce it off. And so we can never fully be conscious without that bouncing.
One interesting thing about what Anna, you just said, into education realm. If you think about conventional education, basically asks students to postpone to use their voices until they become educated. Because until then, you need to learn 2 + 2 = 4, laws of Newton, and so on and so forth. And then you can start, after you graduated, now we can listen to you in serious way. We might listen to you in serious way. And before that, we can say, who are you? You are ignorant, and because you're ignorant, we cannot, you're not educated. It's not worth listening to you. Where is your diploma? Show your diploma before we can listen to you. And we can take you seriously. And which makes the whole education is, traditional education is non-dialogic, of course, and not humane from the point of view, again, from Bakhtin's point of view.
And let me say that if we are premised that learning is a creating of new connections all the time, here I think this dialogue is enable us to expand the connections we are creating with others' ideas, with other perspectives, with other the point of views about what disturb you, or what you learn, or what you are occupying with.
And the biggest question become in this case, is it this learning educational? Is it good, in other words, or not? Good for what, for whom, and so on and so forth. And this is where dialogue transforms learning into education, and also invites other forms of education that is not learning either. And but it's create this kind of meta things that makes learning education, that humanization of the learning. Because you're absolutely right, learning happened whether or not we want it or not. We're thrown in the learning. We don't have choice not to learn. Our synopsis is constantly blah, blah, blah. Even when we sleep, something is changing. We're transforming all the time. When we stop transforming that way, we almost like that, which is also transformation, but in different ways. Yeah. Other?
Can I ask you to say something about
Surely.
reading a book? It's not dialogue, because I know you talk about how literacy kills general dialogue, and once it put in word, it can change. But I still feel like, personally, when you read a book, it feels like having dialogue with the author, and your understanding of the author changes.
Sure. Well, in my view, that's a kind of dialogue. The same thing when we talk of so-called internal dialogue with ourselves. It is a kind of a form that reminds real dialogue, but it is not that real dialogue. And because the problem is, again, the text cannot reply to you. Yeah, you can see things. It's almost like I can have a dialogue with this, with this my Mag. I can have that. I can imagine Mag replying to me. And it could be, for me, very interesting. Religious people make it serious. I'm just almost like make it a joke, but no, it is possible. Artistic people, poetic people make it really serious dialogue with the things. But let me, and I apologize if it's very insensitive, my joke will be, but this is Russian joke, and I'm coming from Russian culture that love to make very paradoxical jokes and politically incorrect jokes. And this is a joke about that when, the joke is going like that. When people address God, it's called pray. When people hear God's voice, it's called schizophrenia. And this is how it makes different from real dialogue. I'm sorry, I should find some other better way to explain it without offending religious people, but I just couldn't find that. Anyway, this sounds like
As we are talking, I'm trying to kind of like think about, we were talking, why is it important to have equal rights of consciousnesses, and why other consciousnesses in education suppress your own voice so you don't see you. But in having a dialogue with the text or with the objects, you only hear your voice, and you're not having a real other to bounce off. You cannot transcend in. You can kind of like think in new ways. Things can fall to your mind. You can have these imaginary voices of your actual peers with whom you are equal consciousness, even the author of the text. But until you check that against real people, it's just is still your fantasy.
Yeah,
you don't really know. So,
it's like I'm saying, Bakhtinian dialogue have 5 features. Just imagine that Bakhtin will be with us. Like there is a picture of Bakhtin right there next to Victor. Imagine this picture of Mikhail Bakhtin who is talking and says, Eugene, what you're saying partially is correct, but partially, let me correct you. This is what I meant by my dialogue. You know, imagine how different it would be in our just dialogue, real dialogue, because, you know, he will say, no, that's not what I meant. Or, you know what, yeah, but you pushing in the, you know, why don't you call it your dialogue rather than my dialogue? you distorted so much, and what you say may be very interesting, but this is, you just project, I might inspire you to say things, but it's, I can see connection with what I said, but it's kind of connection, you know. I don't want to be responsible for what you call Bakhtinian dialogue. You know, please call it your stuff, and you see. But the book, you know, he's dead. He cannot say that. Nobody can say right now that. Even like, I don't know, Victor might disagree with me about, but it's still we will talk about what Bakhtinian dialogue is. But you know, rather than Bakhtin will come and say, you know what, let's stop it. This is not me. Call it something else, please. Or he might say, you know, Eugene, oh, I never thought about that. That's actually good. And it's really enriching me. But let's say, again, I like that what you're saying, but that's still not me. And thank you very much. It's very interesting for me. And unfortunately, because he's dead, we cannot engage with him. That's why our consciousness is not equal, because I'm always overruled. I can overrule Bakhtin.
Right. Also, think about like playing chess with yourself and trying to solve something. You can never kind of really defeat or lose to yourself, because you don't know how somebody else would actually get you something that you never, you can be pushed to a point, but you never can escape that your own self. And the chess is very dialogical game, kind of like it's really a dialogue with just moves, not even talk, but it's a dialogue, because if I do this, you will do that.
No, it's not because of that, Anna. I disagree with you, respectively. It's because there is opaqueness of consciousness. I don't know what another person thinks.
Exactly.
I might try to plan. I may be, my guess can be correct, but still, the most interesting game that you don't know the intentions of another person. And that's what's difficult to play chess with yourself, because the other consciousness with whom you're so-called playing is transparent to you. And it's so difficult to play with yourself because of that. That transparency kills that distance yourself from another person. And that's the most interesting in the play, to figure out like what's going on, to manipulate another. That's why chess is definitely not dialogic. It's very monologic game, but it still has this aspect, dialogical aspect of opaqueness of consciousness. And that's the most interesting. By the way, this is what means that you're playing with equal partner, equal strength. What does it mean? Exactly that another person is not transparent. Because if it's transparent, if you're a very good player and another a very bad player, that's so non-interesting, because you know what's going on. Everything is predictable for you. There is nothing, there is no events. Events coming from unpredictability, opaqueness. And that's what makes, but the text, you also has this transparency, but there is, the text cannot reply to you. You know what? That's not what I meant. Sorry. You're asking wrong question. I didn't even think about that. Or, wow, this is great, but it's not me. It's you, Lei, who thought this way. You see, maybe again, you're inspired by reading, but it's your ideas. Very interesting ideas, very exciting, but not mine. And you projecting it on me, okay? So in a way, you kind of playing with another person's you're trying to recreate it, but it's more like puppet rather than a real person. And so as a puppet doesn't have equal rights. It has to do what you're doing with this puppet.
You want to develop your imagination, you have to do some exercise like this.
Yeah, it's very good. It's imagination, and you're learning from that a lot. But and there is part of this. It has dialogic features, but it's not full-scale dialogue. The same thing with yourself. You don't have full-scale dialogue. It's kind of pseudo dialogue, kind of dialogue.
I get it. Yeah.
Any other questions? Victor,
Or
Diana, you can just type if you can't use the voice.
Okay, well, go ahead, Diana.
My power came on about 3/4 of the way through. So that was nice. Yeah, I don't feel like I can participate in a dialogue with you because I don't feel like I'm on equal footing. I have not read his work, but the conversation has been very interesting because it makes me think about public education and teaching and learning, and what's your definition of learning, and does it really happen by yourself? And I have a strong belief that you have to have conversation when you're teaching mathematics, or it doesn't happen. And so these conversations or dialogue about levels of what does dialogue look like? What does it mean? What kinds of dialogue can you have are fascinating to me, because I've always felt the more equal footing the people can have in a conversation, the richer the conversation and the more that everybody gets out of it. So even though I can't participate in this particular dialogue, I have been appreciating the conversation.
Well, my comments then is, I said, Amnon, you always can participate because I don't know, I know only with other people. And if, for example, if you didn't read Bakhtin, it means I didn't read Bakhtin. I mean, I've read Bakhtin for myself, but not for you. And in this case,
Right.
it's me to engage together, like you can say, what the hell, Bakhtin? Why is Bakhtin important? And so on and so forth. So in this case, we can participate, always can participate in dialogue. If not only we assume that it's like, oh, you just don't know Bakhtin, you cannot participate in dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it changes then, the dialogue changes because you as a participant bring something yourself, which goes some other direction, which is all legitimate. Yeah.
And this is especially this notion, in my view, collapse of knowledge with person who doesn't know something. It's extremely important for, in my view, for being a good teacher, first of all, because that's exactly, suddenly you don't know what means 2 + 2 with the person who doesn't know what it is. Because if you don't get to that point of not knowing that, you're both knowing and not knowing, but you definitely don't know with the person, with another person. Otherwise, it will be always this monologic imposition. Right. And not getting excited and interested about things. And I think, Diana, that's why your dissertation for me is so interesting and important, because you, in my view, well, maybe I'm wrong, but getting in this exactly this sense of collapse of the knowledge for the teacher and becoming on equal foot, equal, not necessarily equal in terms of with the same people. No, it's equal in terms of we have rights, equal rights, and we can get serious, we can become thoughtful in the same way, at the same serious way, and emotional about what we engage in.
No, that absolutely happens. It absolutely happened when they dug into the kids' work and the kid problem. They became kids themselves.
And at the same time, you become kid and they become philosopher like you or mathematicians like you, because it's going in both directions, this kind of thing. You can become a kid philosopher or kid mathematician, both in both ways. Hi, Mariam, joining us. Any other comments before we switch to Anna's very dramatic thing? Just prepare parental discretion advice. Victor, Vida, Mariam, okay, Anna.
Just let me do one thing before I present. I forgot that I cannot have the two screens in order to present because it will mess up everything. So I have to get out of my two screen viewing everything, and then it will be much better. Okay. So let me just then start this presentation on one screen and then share it with you. Okay. So I have to make sure that the sound will be heard because we will have some video. Okay, so my presentation in the Saransk conference was really complementary to Eugene. Talks about exactly the same issues, but from a slightly different point of view or different accents. So I called it Bakhtinian and ethical ontological dialogues in education, with the same idea of like, how can that kind of dialogue exist in education? And again, I also went to set the problem, and this is the way how I set the problem. Can education be dialogic in Bakhtinian sense? And let me just, why is it, see, okay. And if so, what kind of education can support Bakhtinian dialogue? So I'm just going to kind of explore what education needs to look like to support dialogue of that kind. So what does it mean? Can education be dialogic in Bakhtinian sense? And this Bakhtinian sense, we just talked about it a little bit longer, so I don't have to repeat everything. I call ethical ontological dialogism partially for all these reasons, and also from reading a new book, dissertation by David Sabe, or this article that you also read, where he really stresses this ethical dimension of dialogue, of people relating to each other. And that's in our root of that equal rights. What does it mean to relate to each other as equal rights? So an educational approach of creating and promoting opportunities for dialogues in which all the participants, students and teachers, because I'm saying teachers like that because these kinds of roles start to morph, in educational event relate to each other as exactly saying, quote, a plurality of consciousnesses with equal rights and each with its own world that combine but are not merged in the unity of the event. And this is very important, that it's equal rights and that also they don't merge. They cannot read each other. We just mentioned they are opaque to each other. We constantly have to be in a dialogue to start kind of seeing each other through our voices, but we can never be completely there, merge completely into each other. And that's very important for many other reasons later on that we can talk about. So again, I'm going to kind of focus on what's consciousnesses with equal rights. And so here, Eugene also talked about it, and he said that there are three kind of like things that he looked at, that people be taken seriously. That second one, that they can introduce their own interests and concerns to change, interrupt, to leave the dialogue. And the third one, the right of disagreement. I think I kind of unpacked the first one with my criteria here, which I didn't mean to be exhaustive. So what does it mean to be taken seriously? People in dialogue take each other seriously and with interest. So I combined his first two into this, and I tried to unpack that. So they consider each other's opinions as worthy to take into consideration. They consider each other's opinions with interest. They consider each other's opinions as worth exploring. They want to know the reasons that each other have for forming their opinions, like where do you come from? Why do you think so? They want to test their own ideas and opinions in the light of each other's alternative views. And they have something important to tell the others in that moment. Like, and I think this really especially important for you, Diane, now, and I want to tell particularly you. So it's both ways, to be taken seriously and to tell something to somebody else, because we are in this relationship of importance and interest in what we are dialoguing and in each other. So what kind of education would be conducive to such Bakhtinian dialogue? And I just quickly go through various approaches to education. So traditional school does not promote ethical ontological dialogue because authoritarian schools delegitimate relating to others as consciousnesses with equal rights, with power and violence. Or you can say now, after our talk, they suppress voices of a student with their authoritarian imposition of truths and values, norms and expectations. Progressive school does not promote the ethical ontological dialogue because authoritative school patronizes and manipulates the student, hijacking the subjectivity for its ulterior preset goals. So the goals are the same as traditional school, but it does it through hijacking the subjectivity. And so democratic school comes closest to promoting education. And this is going to be kind of exploration of a democratic school. So what is a democratic school for those who know and for those who don't know? What is a liberal democratic school? So in liberal democratic school, education is understood to belong to the personal sphere of negative freedom. Isaiah Berlin, a philosopher of freedom, I would say, of liberty, had a notion that there are really two very close but very different views of freedom, and he called them negative and positive freedom. Negative freedom is guaranteed and limited through the democratic decision making. So what's negative freedom? It's that part of a person's rights where nobody else has a right to interfere with them by force or by manipulation. In other words, legitimately, we can advise people to behave this or that, but legitimately it's up to them to make decision of what they want to do, why they want to do, or how they want to relate to each other. Even we disagree. So it's a freedom that's not defined from anybody but by the person, and it's unpredictable for the person too. So it's a freedom from. You can think about it as a 10 commandments. They just tell you what you can't do, where the limits of that freedom are. But within that, you can do whatever you want in any way you want. And so nobody's telling you what to do. Positive freedom is freedom for. Like the freedom is defined. You can do anything you want in studying mathematics, except you have to study mathematics, something like that. Or think about it like those traffic rules in Pennsylvania. If you don't see a sign, right turn is okay, you can turn right. It doesn't have to say anything. If it doesn't say it's forbidden to turn right, you can turn right. That's the negative freedom. In New York, if it doesn't say anything, you have to assume that you cannot turn right. You only can turn right if it explicitly says that a right turn is allowed. So in that sense, they come from very different sides. So negative freedom is guaranteed in a democratic school and limited through the democratic decision making. There are rules, regulations, how we conduct, but education belongs to this sphere of negative freedom. It doesn't fall into the positive freedom. It falls into the personal decision. The sphere of negative freedom is maximized as much as possible. So we have different democracies in the world and different democratic schools also, in which this sphere of personal liberties for education is bigger or smaller. Like some things you can decide whatever you want, like some hobbies that you want, some clubs that you want to join, but there is like a core things that you have to take. So it's kind of less liberties than in somewhere where you completely can decide. In a democratic school, self-education is legitimate, which is not either in the progressive or traditional. And this I quote Eugene and myself and Eugene. The first political principle of the Bakhtinian dialogue in education is a student self-education, where the student is the final authority to define their own education. And so that's in a nutshell, repetition of what Eugene presented just a little bit before. And now I would like to present an ethical ontological dialogue in a liberal democratic school. How might it look like and what it is? So what I will do here, I will show a case of the stolen makeup, a big dialogue in a Summerhill school in 1991. It's an excerpt from a larger movie called Summerhill at 70. And this year, Summerhill is celebrating 100 years of existence. So it was exactly 30 years ago. And it's very short, about 7 minutes. Let me just go through this. This was in a Russian summary of that. So I'm going to tell you what will happen because it will go very fast. And even for the native English speakers, sometimes it's hard to catch everything. So what you will see is one of their Summerhill general meetings that they had in a large room of their house, where that's a boarding school. And in that place, they brought all kinds of things to be decided about the school, about personal problems, since it was boarding school, about many living problems that they had to solve. And in this particular case of stolen makeup, a girl complains that another girl stole a huge amount of makeup from her, a whole case that was worth a lot of money. The other girl, Mavra, denies that and says that that's not true, that she gave the case to a third girl who was supposed to return it. That third girl also says, no, that's not what happened. You're just saying that. And so it's a puzzle. They then vote whether to take that case to consider on the whole larger meeting and what to do about it. And they accept to take it as a tribunal to start solving it. And one of the house parents or adults proposes that there will be a search party, and that they form a group of people who will search rooms of these girls and other areas where some girls could have hidden that. And because it's a case of a stolen one, that all these girls should not be there when the search party goes to search. Most of the people in the search party are boys because they are sort of supposed to be not interested in. There are a couple of girls there too, but most are boys. So then we will see that search begins, and one girl does not want to leave her room. We don't even see who she is at that moment. And she doesn't want boys to go through her private things because she doesn't want the boys to look what she has, their private stuff. And they had to return back to the meeting to solve this problem, what to do now and how to solve that. And this girl says, no, I don't want boys to go through my private things. Another female teacher supports her and says, that's really not fair that the boys go. Girls have all kinds of private things that boys should not be seeing. And the previous house parent proposal says, well, we wanted to just help you solve that. And if you can either, accept this logical way of doing it or not, you can drop the case. They drop the case. And then the final scene is a discussion between these two girls who complained about the stolen makeup and her friend in their room, about how it was terribly disrespectful, how the boys were saying incredibly rude things to them, like, what do you have to hide, like a vibrator or something like that. And that previously the founder of the school, A.S. Neal, who was dead at the time, if he heard that, he would turn in his grave. So now watch it, and if you want to watch it then later again, it will be okay, but that's what happens.
Summerhill School was founded in 1921 by A.S. Neal.
Stacy,
Can I have a tribunal case?
What's it about?
what's it about?
Mavra, she's lost about 17 quid of mine. It's not in money, but it's in makeup. A shitload, and it's expensive. And a makeup.
Okay. What is that? What is?
We didn't kind of clarify that from the question. Because night after dark is like after.
What is that? She can have tribunal case.
Martha, get back. Get back.
Okay. I've given Martha 3 days to give these back because about 3 days ago we had a fight and it was in her room on the table by her bed, yeah, at the end of her bed. And she said she gave it to Donna to give to me. Now that is total crap. That is total bullshit. She never gave it to Donna. And I want my fucking makeup back. And if she's lost it, she's gonna have to pay for it.
Martha, you said you gave me the makeup, and that is a complete lie. I couldn't understand why you would lie like that. You never gave it back to me. I would give it to Stacy if you gave it to me. Christ almighty, you know I would. That's a fucking lie.
You came in, took it out, okay? And that is not a lie. You said, can I have the bag because Kirsty wants it, okay?
Lorraine, 2p fine.
And you just want
Sonny,
to spite
2p
me.
fine. Roger.
I agree with Martha.
I propose that an ombudsman sign deals with it and then brings it back to special meeting or something, because we're just going to argue about it forever. Maybe the main... I'm making that proposal that an ombudsman deals with it, okay? As well. Okay, I'm taking your proposals. Matthew.
I've got a proposal. And the proposal is that the following people now act as an investigation committee. And those people are Henry, Rowley, Tomo, Roger, Mirai, Isabella, Sarah Fox, Naomi, and there's one other person. Who's the other person? Tomo, did I mention him? Yeah. Albert. Okay, and that they have the power now to go and search the following areas, which are Mavra's room, Kirsty's room, Tamsin's room, the girls' shack, and Diana's room. So that's my proposal. The other thing in that proposal is that nobody's allowed to go into those areas until they've been searched.
No, I will not get out.
How dare they kick her out of her own fucking room?
See what you're doing in my room.
She has a goddamn orthodontal appointment, and they... How dare they?
Oh no.
At least they can do it when she's there. I mean, Christ, how dare they? They have no rights.
They have got a right that they can go in. Okay.
What do you want me to say for you?
Say that I've got a right to be in here.
Let's go, come on.
No, it's my room.
Okay, then we'll stay in here.
Special meeting!
Good, let's do it.
Speak for me, okay, Donna?
Because me and Albert and Tomo went down to Tamsin's room, and Tamsin is saying that she doesn't want us to search her room when she's not in there, because she doesn't, I mean, it's kind of like she's saying it's her right and her privacy, and that it's only fair that way. And but I think, I'm not sure what the proposal was. I think it was that they're not in there and that no one goes in there. But she's saying that she thinks that's completely unfair. And we're calling a special meeting to clarify and find out what's happening.
I think I should at least be allowed to have the right to be in there while you're searching through all my stuff.
Well, Donna, it was voted on in the meeting, you know? Just so you...
Okay, I'm going to darling.
Well, I just think it really stinks that there's a whole load of blokes searching the girl's room. I mean, there are all sorts of private things, you know.
Yeah.
They're going to know sort of what kind of tampons she used and everything else. And I mean, if it was my room, I'd really want to be there to know what parts of my private life people know about.
We made a point of trying to get some girls on the investigation committee, and we did. But the problem is that most of the older girls were involved in it in some form or other. These guys brought the case. We're trying to do it for them, and we're trying to clear the whole thing up. And now they're the ones that are making it awkward. I mean, if you choose to drop your case, then drop your case. But you know, if you want us to do the case, let's do it this way.
Stacey.
If this is causing so much hassle, I might as well just drop the case. They were just looking and giggling and saying, oh, they just wanted the money. Now that is complete bollocks.
But listen, you know, I mean, this is one of the privileges of being a carriage kid, you know? You get your own room, you get your own dressers, you know, you get your own things, and you're allowed to put whatever the hell you want to put in them without without Roger, who's a fucked up little boy, Mirai, who's also a fucked up little boy, and Tiashius is also a fucked up little boy. They're all this little gang. And Big Matthew, the staff, has just these favorites. And he'll do that, and he said, oh, I'm trying to put as much girls on it as I can, you know. That is complete bullshit. Isabella, Sarah, that's all I can remember.
I know,
Naomi.
they were even slagging off Tamsin, saying, oh, she might have a vibrator under her pillow. That is the worst thing I've ever heard in Summerhill.
No,
the
that's
way
what
they
you
had
mean.
the guts to say that in front of me. I just told them to fuck off and not to slag her off, and they fucking well did shut up. They're fucking scared of us.
And also,
I'm glad.
Stacey, you're never gonna get your stuff back.
I know, that really sucks.
You have to know that now. You're never gonna get it back. And Margaret just lies through her teeth because she knows she can get away with it. I mean, Albert, all the staff here have no idea, you know, no idea what Neil would think. Neil's probably turning over in his grave right now.
Like, the staff should be considered as carriage kids. They should have to propose that they're allowed to smoke in their room. They should have to propose that they can do whatever they please, because they could just go downtown any time of the night. I think there should be an actual age group. You can't go downtown with less than 3 people, even if you are a staff. Because staff can just go downtown at 12 o'clock at night, go to the pub and get pissed and come back at 3 in the morning. Now that fucking sucks if the kids can't do that.
Okay. So that's something for us to think about. Is this a Bakhtinian ethical ontological dialogue in education or not? Or what is it if not? And of course, what place should such a dialogue, ethical ontological dialogism, have in education, if any? It's the similar question that Eugene posed and that we started discussing. And so what do you think? That was my presentation. What do you think of this dialogue? Is it ethical ontological dialogue? Is it educational dialogue? What's going on here? And what kind of place does it have in education?
Actually, Anna, I'd like to shift the burden onto you. Can you give us an answer of why you think that that's an ethical ontological dialogue? Because I just want to get a better picture of what you mean by the ethical ontological dialogue, given that you were talking.
Well, I think that, first of all, I think that people were relating to each other absolutely like people with equal rights of consciousness. Second, I think that they were discussing a matter of deep living interest to all of them. Their relationships, whether there was somebody who is stealing or not, then what's female privacy, was the relationships with boys and girls, whether you can just solve problems with the logical reasoning like that parent wanted, or there are some other things. There are many things that they were discussing that are, for me, deep learning about yourself, what you want. Like, for instance, Stacy, the blonde girl who started at the end, says, well, if it's causing so much, I'm going to just drop the case. So what does it really mean for her? What did she learn about herself or not? And then later, her disgust and their criticism of all the boys and what's going on in that school, and whether people have privileges or not. It's deep life learning for them, and becoming who they are, and who their voices are, and what they want in life. To me, that's that. And ethical is because it's about their relationships. Like you saw Mavra at the beginning when they accuse her, she goes like, what? It's not true. And so do you believe her or not? So we all are being pulled in now as an audience to make our own opinions about what happened to. So it's unfinalizable dialogue. We can now continue about their issues or whatever else, pull it in any other way. What's important for what's learning there and what's education there.
If there is education there.
Yes, okay. It is education there.
I felt that the problem with the audience. I think that somehow it's make it more show for the camera. And and I don't know. I felt that it was not. It could be a more real dialogue or more open dialogue when few people. So
I actually disagree with you, Anna. Exactly disagree. I actually like that, including camera. I like, this is what Bakhtinian, in my view, means by agora. You can see one boy is reading, he doesn't interested in this, what's going on. Another boy playing, he's very peripheral. For him, it's not very serious. So he's, I would say, not in the dialogue, but very in the periphery. Although later he became a little bit more interested in that. And I like that. It's actually, this is not, the Bakhtinian dialogue is not about purification of that. It's exactly being in that messy environment when somebody don't care about that. And that's part of the problem. That's boys, for boys, it's just fun. You know,
but doesn't you hear some competition? But didn't you hear some competition? You know,
no, it is. And that's part of the...
Who is just, you know...
Yeah. And this is part of Bakhtinian.
I want to show you that it is my truth, and it's less open to, or enabled to be open to your voice.
Yes, and that's part of the, in my view, it's unavoidable part of the Bakhtinian dialogue, that messiness, that monologic in, there is never will be, the Bakhtinian dialogue never will be free from this monologic excursion in different ways. Domination, power, everything should be there, in my view. Other purification from that will kill, in my view, this Bakhtinian dialogue, because it's exactly happened despite of that, and through that. The fact that the boys, for boys, it's a spectacle, and it's kind of, you know, the girls are fighting with each other. It's almost like they're present at the corrida. Okay, yes, let's see them fighting each other. And all these sexual jokes, what it might be on the pillow of the girls. But it's brings this collision of different justices, like justice of not being stolen, and how to figure out who is perpetrator and how to prove that, rather than you know, making just claim. Who knows what the truth is? And another justice about privacy, to have your private life and not to be you know, surveillance of other people who make this absolutely disrespectful.
But what about the level of the attention?
Oh, huge. It's such a focus, in my view. Look at this. It's called again, depends on whom you're talking about. Of course,
well, I think Ahmed has a maybe very strong point that you cannot really learn if you're in such a tension, that interferes with your clear mind and learning. I think that's what you want to say, Ahmed, right?
I have to think about what I have to say.
You know, the attention is, everything is hetero, is diverse, including attention as well. For some people, they laser beam on that for a rather long time, especially these girls, main girls who is part of that. And for others too, it can be in and out. And for some, the boy who was reading a book, he was not there at all. Or at least maybe we didn't see him whole part. Maybe he was some part of that.
Well, there were many others there who we don't.
I used to live in kibbutz for 27 years, and I actually know the meetings of all the members of the kibbutz in order to get some decision. So it reminds me the same. The same atmosphere, okay.
Yeah.
And they were the strongest, the stronger, the weaker. It's all of I know it's struggle, okay. It looks like a struggle, more than a dialogue, as I understand dialogue.
Yeah, and the level of seriousness is very on different levels for different people, and passion as well. And
So in a way, I see Lei also has similar comment that this was more than argument than actually nobody want to listen to another. And that comes to me, points to something else. What are the relationships that are conducive to dialogue that's educational dialogue or argument, and where is it good or not? Like, for instance, Eugene wants to talk recently about a relationship as being relationship of friendly strangers, not relationship of the community members to which you are in various ways deeply, passionately connected and have either to fight or to support. So you have vested interests and not for searching the truth, but for some other things. So this is the question, like if they would be just kind of dispassionate that this parent wanted to do, the male parent who said, okay, let's research, let's find out the facts, no, and they quickly exploded. So this is the question for us.
And in my view, it's not true that they're not listening to each other. They're listening very carefully. And I think these girls, for example, listen very carefully. This male parent who was saying, okay, if you want us to figure out who stole it, you have to do it properly. You need to allow this impartiality to introduce and make a search, proper search. Like almost like square meter by square meter. It should be scientific, almost like logical, and so on and so forth. If your passions are more important about privacy, okay, drop the case. And they did. So there is a careful listening argumentations on different sides. And the kids are voting. Again, we didn't see their voting, and we didn't see, of course, more discussion, in my view. Will be interesting to watch that. But I think they're listening very much. There is huge disagreements, and they prevail. The disagreements prevail.
Maybe listen. Maybe listen. But if you want to express something, I think it's depend on your social position at the time, for example. So it's not equal right. It's not really equal right to talk. There is some hidden streams.
I don't think equal rights can ever fully happen, and this is but it is direction to that, and in that school they're trying to facilitate that. So everyone who has something to say have opportunity to say that. But of course, it depends on the. You need to have skill for that, and so on and so forth, and culture of that.
I think what's important is that people own their standpoints and that they feel free to express them and to demand that we listen, and they do listen to each other in order to kind of figure out how to relate to that. Very often we are not used to such a passionate dialogues when it comes to academic, let's say, subjects, not personal life, but they could happen too. And I've been several times really in situations with people really deeply quarreled about some, like very abstract issue. I think that something like that even happened, Eugene, in that case of teaching your students how to work with the children in math with this 2 and 2 is 4, and then when you brought the possibilities that maybe really it's not always 4 to your students, that they got very angry with that.
But it's true, I agree that the level of listening to each other is very different. Some people don't listen at all, some listen partially, some in and out, and some staying. I like this very interesting scholar, Alexander Sidorkin. When he was interested in Bakhtin, he wrote, it was part of his dissertation, and he wrote a book about that. And I really like how he talks about Bakhtinian dialogue with, again, jokes from Russia, with 3-drink theory. 3-drink theory is like going like that. And this is who he thinks that about Bakhtinian dialogue is about, from point of view of attention. He said, how how people have in the party, when they have a party, they first they come there and they talk to each other in rather, they can stay on the topic, they focused and so forth. Then they have one drink and they start participating in several conversations at the same time. The kind of attention is like start going around, and then another drink, and sometimes they couldn't even remember what they talked about with whom, but they remember that they were having a very good time. And he said this is ecology of Bakhtinian dialogue. That's his claim is. And that's how it should be, rather than, and that attempts to purify one form or another kills it. And
you talked about Bakhtinian dialogue in terms of no expertise. Okay.
Yeah.
There's no expertise, and I think there is some expertise of people, of young people, of these boys and girls. There were some expertise in talking, you know, with self-confidence. They have some expertise that enable them or encourage them to talk among public.
I'm not talking about that expertise. I'm talking about expertise. This is there.
Yeah, but this is also kind of
no, but that's different one. It's not what I'm saying. Of course, everything is expertise based. Of course, the fact that you talk, the fact that you know how to sit, that's, of course, it requires skills. But I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about when we talk with Diane, especially, we're talking about expertise. You are here and I'm there. And we both recognize that, and that gives me rights, additional rights, and takes some rights from you. You listen and shut up, and I talk because I'm there. And this is expertise. We're talking about that type of expertise.
Anna, is the older boys and girls talked much than the more than the younger one?
Well, in this particular case, there were more teenage involved, but there are other cases in the same movie where younger boys and everybody of different ages are included. Of course, we're just looking now at one particular dialogue.
Yeah.
They go
the veterinarian versus the
Mm-hmm. They go in many different directions. Even in the Only Summer Here. I also am working on a big project about exploring dialogues in some Norwegian democratic schools that were founded in the 60s, and those were high schools. And fortunately, there are some transcripts of their town hall meetings. So it's very fascinating to think about how they were able to relate to each other in different spheres of educational practice. For instance, when it comes to the matters of governance or the matters of democracy itself, like who is, how to organize participation, is it direct or representative governance or not? How would be decisions made by simple majority or supermajority or something like that? When it comes to all these matters about how they should organize themselves, and then when it comes to their decisions about creating educational ecology of the school, they relate to each other very on equal footing, and they very vocally agree, disagree. They create really Bakhtinian dialogue. But their decisions about what should be allowed to themselves as learners in the school kind of limit their possibilities for ethical ontological dialogue, let's say in math or in other subjects that are more traditionally the subjects of education. So it's at the same time, it's a paradox. They do that when they are thinking they're not learning, but they practice that kind of dialogue out of which a lot of things come, but they themselves limit themselves in their decisions to a little bit illiberal democracy. And so the question is, how is that possible? Like they are aware and not aware. Where is what makes let's say, their learning educational for themselves. So issues where they disagree or agree, they're very fascinating. In whether you think that you have a right to disagree, and that's Eugene's third kind of criterion of ethical ontological dialogue, that you have a right to disagree. Do you think yourself or expect from yourself or the society from you or from this that the learners are going to question everything that the teachers are teaching them when it comes to science, when it comes to math, when it comes to engineering, when it comes to these kinds of areas where some people consider to be experts or no more? And why do we think that students should not have that right, or they not expect that from them? And what would it be if they, if everything that existed before in culture, science, art, and everything is taken and given to younger generation or to people who haven't been there, like, here it is what we did. What do you think about that? Like a food for just the new deconstruction, it would be different than if we come to you and say, like, shut up and just, this is it now, first learn and then you have time to talk about it. That's very interesting. Like, it's a difference in the position.
Depend on the context, on the lot of context.
Mm-hmm.
Subject matters. And
but one thing that I think is that the genuine education for a person is something in which they're invested and which makes difference for their own lives and subjectivity. And we can be in various places where we wasted a lot of time in school learning things that we forget right away, and they really don't matter to us. And that is that education or not. But we do get credentials that we pass that subject with flying colors or something like that. Yeah.
I have a little experience working in agile learning centers in spaces that are similar to the Summerhill kind of space, right? Liberal democratic kind of free school things. And what you're saying now, Ana, about, there's these things that happen in traditional schools, all this time that is spent and it's kind of wasted, and you don't remember any of these things. Well, I mean, we can counter the same thing against these liberal democratic schools. You could say the kids don't remember most of what the arguments that they've had were. It's not about the content, it's about how it structures. It's the socialization process. Like, these are the norms, these are the skills, the capabilities that lie behind that are things like these kids learn that if you want to organize a group of people and you want to try and seek some kind of justice of whatever kind, like, these are some of the processes you can use, and some of these democratic free schools, they even use like Robert's Rules of Order, for example. So the kids learn like formal meeting procedures and things like that. They're not being taught them explicitly, but they kind of pick them up, right?
Mm-hmm.
This, for me, goes back to, I'm curious about your use of Berlin, because Berlin's use of distinction between positive and negative freedoms, which I think you characterized right. I'm curious about your emphasis on the negative freedoms versus positive freedoms, because I would interpret the positive freedoms as being what, like, Martha Nussbaum would call like capabilities. Like, you are free from interference. That's a negative freedom. You're free from the teacher's authorial, dictatorial powers over what to do. Those are things that we emphasize in liberal democratic free schools. But what about the capabilities? What are the things that the kids are able to do? We can say they're better capable at running meetings, better capable at dealing with this kind of ambiguity and having to respond to each other, which I think is a more authentic way than like the way that social structures are built up in traditional schools. But a lot of the rest of the world operates within those dictatorial kind of authorial structures. And so having some capability dealing with those and knowing how to negotiate those is also a skill that young people may need. The reason I bring that up, I mean, that's probably enough, but the reason I bring it up is because a lot of teachers that I've spoken to that have worked in these spaces, they feel a little guilt after the fact about whether or not the kids are able to succeed in the world and like what opportunities are then available to them. And I would say that that's, you know, whatever that is, but that sense is tied to, I think, a lack of cultivating specific kind of capabilities, certain kinds of positive freedom to, and, you know, like I said, the ability to run meetings, we can escape this kind of, oh my God, I've taught these kids nothing, is, you know, they have learned certain capabilities. So it might be just a question of like, well, you're cultivating some capabilities and not others, and that's always just a given.
Well, you very complex thing that you're talking about. There are of course things going on in life and in school that are complex, and they go contra each other. So socialization is, you know, like you're learning without knowing that you're learning and becoming part of the society, the way how society shapes you, whether you like it or not. Like learning language in which you're born or something like that. You're not choosing what language you're going to learn or something like that. So definitely there is room for that. But the negative freedom is ultimately a freedom of a person to choose what of this whole range when they are able to choose. But what you said, for me, the solution would be, if there is a rich learning environment, and we are many of us exposed to richer and richer learning environment in which you can be exposed to diverse practices, to diverse areas of knowledge, to diverse epiphanies of serendipity, whatever you can meet, there will be something to which you will be able to choose to actually learn as your project in life. Other things you will learn to different degrees and when you want them and when you must learn them, because you have to live in life and you have to be part of a meeting, you have to learn to negotiate, or you may never do that. Maybe you will become like, you know, like solitary poet or artist or a craftsman who will never have to run any meetings. So what do you need to know that? That's it. You know, so kind of like, but what's very important for me at least is that that you have a benefit of having dignity to choose how you want to shape yourself, if you want to call it shape, or what do you want to be interested in, without being interfered with that. Of course, when you say capabilities, like there is no freedom, it's a different type of freedom. It's a freedom of nature. We cannot be outside of this world. We have to live in this world, and understanding what our possibilities are and where do we want to move, freer or not, is a part of living. But it's a part of living that it doesn't mean that you as an educator can't give advice to people and say, well, let's discuss it. Why do you want this or not? Or if you go this way or that way, is it good for you or not? But ultimately, you're the person to decide that. It's like, you know, the lawyer can tell you a lot of implications of what you're doing will go this way or that way. And if you do that, you have these obligations or not. It's not being free doesn't mean being without obligations and without necessities and without any learning. But it's kind of like, whose is the ultimate right to decide, first of all, to make an opinion about something. If you don't have an opinion about something, you will still learn a lot. Like, you can speak a language all your life and never know its grammar or have any opinion about whether it's a good language or not, but still very capable of using it, right? But if you want to to study language as something for your own education to understand how human mind works or how communication works, then it becomes point of your education.
Anna, I think we get into it again. We get into the questions of the what is the aims, what the objective, what is the purpose of education.
Right.
That's and
well, we always have to go to that.
I think the bigger question, sorry to say that, jump and Lei asked an interesting question as well, which is related to that. Look at the Anna on chat. But the question is not what is education, but who decides that. And Abram, my answer to you, the positive freedom of course exists. The question is who decides that. And the difference is then when negative freedom supersides positive freedom, it's the student who decides his or her positive freedom. Like what do I want? Or like what you talk about skills, what's important? And in education so far, except probably democratic education, the whole idea is based on paternalism, that experts and society knows better for students what students, first of all, the students should study. Second, what they should study, how, with whom, and so on and so forth. And
who decided for what?
Yes, and also to worry about what will happen with them. This is again paternalism. Like, I know what the future will be, and I want to know that student will be connected to the future. First of all, no, you don't know what the future is. And that's also interesting. What does it mean, education with unknown future? When the future is unknown, and it's getting more and more unknown. Like it's less and less this idea that you know the future or even can guess more or less correctly becomes true. But again, Anna, why don't you switch in answer to Lei's question?
Yeah, Lei's question we probably can all read is that this was a dialogue, there were nobody's teaching content, and whether we can be teaching content. And that's a very interesting, and whether such a dialogue can exist when there is a content with a preset curriculum goal. And the question is for me, Lei, also, who sets that goal? Like why, and who sets what the content is? The content is something that that's historically, socially, educationally formed, and in different eras is very different content. And in different cultures is very different content, maybe today less than in the past. So that all becomes the question, that's one thing. Another thing, it becomes the question, do all the students or all the people in the world have to learn the same so-called content? And what is that content for them? Teachers teach something they think is a content, but students take out of that whatever is their learning content for them or learning goals, you know, and for whatever reason they want to, if they want to. And sometimes you say at the end of semester, the whole idea of education today is very structured in many different ways that are completely arbitrary. Why semester should decide what the end of learning is? For instance, when I studied in Belgrade, I studied developmental psychology or psychology of development for 5 semesters. It was not considered to be done before 2.5 years of learning the same. Today, somehow developmental psychology has to be done in 16 weeks. I'm against that, but I'm also against 2.5 years. For some people, maybe 16 weeks is okay. You know, like I just want to kind of see what's in there and I'm not much deeper and why and everything. And for some other people, that becomes the whole life study was developmental psychology. So kind of like what the goal, at what point of time, all of these for me become then questionable, and questionable who sets them and for what reasons. And so when we talk about existing education, we're talking about like various things. This one of semesters or years or, you know, grading that some goes, or age level, developmentally appropriate level of like what should the children in 1st grade learn, or fifth grade. People are so very different and have different needs and different views of the world that's all set arbitrary by the culture, and maybe it's okay for some time, for some reason, and not okay for the other. Another thing is this whole idea of dividing people by age and by skill to kind of chunk the knowledge in some kind of purified content forms is also something that like when you hear another language, I like to use this example that you never heard, or when I hear Chinese, for instance, I don't know where your word begins and where your word ends. For me, it's just a stream of sounds that goes past me. I don't know not only what you said, but even like how you even approach saying that we think that words are made out of that language is made out of words or phrases, that it has some grammatical rules. That comes very late when people start to study forms of that, but they can, and it could be defined in so many different ways. So same with education. If we think from the point of view of the learner, then the learner can start defining, of course, not alone, but in constant dialogue with the society, himself, herself, and other people, these units that make meaning, that are important for some reason. How to connect the studying stars with your feelings. People believed in and still believe in astrology or destiny. So there are many different things, and so in a way, the answer to your question is. I don't think that the dialogic approach, the way how I'm talking about it, or with this view that we are making meaning deeply, in which we are invested in subjectivities in the world and appear to ourselves and to other people, in which we create our conscious relationship to the world and everything, has it has to be smuggled in the contemporary education. Contemporary education kind of wants to chop it in the neat compartments and to give it in chunks, and I don't think it's possible completely there. But it always tries to, kind of be smuggled in there. What do you think, Ray?
I believe that when you learn the content, some subject, for example, some issue, some theory, you may and you can and you should enable or to think how you can enable such a dialogue. Okay, what will be the questions? What will be the questions for the students' questions in order to motivate some such a dialogue.
So, my first question
no, Amnon. Dialogue cannot be motivated. As soon as you start motivating.
Okay, not motivated. Okay, sorry, not motivated. I understood. Okay.
It comes from a person's question. So,
not motivated, but you should start. You can initiate it. Okay, initiate some dialogue. You can start with dialogue. Okay. So
and the start is very. Yeah, and that start is.
No, it's what I want to ask is about how a teacher, for example, yes, can start such a dialogue when he want to expose or want to discuss some issue about some content, about some theory, about some problem.
And that's maybe a problem that the teacher cannot start anything. And because from Bakhtinian point of view, I actually would encourage you to look at the Socratic dialogues, which is not necessarily Bakhtinian, but one interesting thing is that Socratic dialogues always started by somebody asking something Socrates, not Socrates asking, But by the way, there is one case when actually Socrates was asking questions, which was dialogue between Socrates and the slave. And the slave must reply because Socrates was not master of that slave, but he was a friend of the master of the slave. So it's only with the slaves the teacher can start it. The teacher becomes teacher only.
Just
let me finish. The teacher becomes teacher only when student asks for help. This is when the relationship of the teacher becomes teacher.
But if he's a partner with the dialogue, so he has the right also.
Yeah.
To begin with some questions. Socrates knew that he is right. Just it was told.
No. That's actually very interesting. In this manner, in dialogue with Meno, I really like that dialogue for that purpose. Meno came to Socrates, not Socrates came to Meno, and Meno asked a question: what's the origin of a virtue? For Socrates, as a partner of dialogue, that question was not important. What's important for him, what he wants to discuss, was what does it mean virtue? Not the origin of the virtue, but what does it mean virtue? And there was fight was going on between Meno and Socrates for the topic of dialogue. And at some point, Socrates said, wait a minute, you came to me, not I came to you. And it means I have to prioritize and you ask me for help. And in this case, I should prioritize you, not me. Although he was saying that, and he was unfortunately very cunning, he still manipulated Meno to discuss exactly what he wanted to discuss. But I think if you forget that manipulation, Socrates was deeply right. If you are a teacher and somebody asks you to help, you should shut up with your own interest. Because in this case, it's not Bakhtinian dialogue anymore, but it is educational dialogue. Because you are in support, you are in position to be a teacher. Somebody asks you to help, so you need to help rather than, well, you know what, help with your struggle. I have my own things. Let me start with my own thing. Which is
not just with problem. You can come to share with you some understanding.
Again, this is part of the tension that I was bringing. That will be not Bakhtinian dialogue. When somebody has a particular role, that somebody assumes the role and orientation of the teacher. And that role assumes when somebody asks you to help, like teach me something. Teach me please about this, and this. In this case,
if I want to share with you,
that's fine.
I don't want you to help me. I want to share with you. You are a friend of mine. I want to share with you something.
But in this case,
I want to share it and to think and that you will help me. What do you think about what I have to share?
Yeah. In this case, you are not my teacher, and I'm not. You are not my teacher. I'm not your teacher. So we're fine. But in this case, there is not that question how a teacher can initiate dialogue, because you're not a teacher. You're just another. That's become sim deduct.
Okay.
So we're guiding each other.
So in practical, Eugene, in practical way, what I believe that some people here want to hear what are you going to do in practical way in schools, for example. What are you doing when you want to discuss some issue or some theory or some idea or some subject?
I don't do that. I usually, my whole, like in my education, my students bring the issue, not me. And I can be provoking, but when I'm like, for example, they don't know how to start.
What is the subject of your course that you?
It doesn't matter subject of the course. I actually found that when I was in.
Nobody will throw you out. Okay, you
no. I want to tell you,
professor, and that's it.
Yeah. Let me tell you that actually, when I start thinking about that, when I was in high school. I was in special math school in Moscow, and they did the same thing. I just realized that I experienced that first as a student, and I forgot about that. And later, I was just like, wow, actually, I was socializing that in my schooling about math. Right now, I'm teaching, if you ask me what I teach multicultural education, urban education, methodology classes, sociocultural approach for graduate students.
And how you present to your students your attitude, your special attitude that I am not telling you anything.
I don't need to present that.
You just come to when you need me for helping.
Yeah, I'll tell you how I'm presenting.
What do you say to them?
I'll tell you how I present it. It's very, in a very simple way. I ask them what we're going to study, and I provide them with the list, with the possibilities to study.
Who decide what will be the list?
Let me finish that. I'll tell you. You're asking good questions, but let me finish. So there is a list that I developed with my colleagues. I look at the internet about interesting topics. And there is, so my students, past students added new topics, and new students can come add new topics. So the students decide. I'm absolutely staying away from that. They decide, and how they decide, it's also become an interesting question, how to decide that.
Also, they can make new topics if they don't find something there.
So in a way, I don't need to start with something because they already has something to choose. And also they make speeches to each other to convince them to vote, if there is a voting, to convince them to vote for their topic, to explain why is it their topic is important and why we should study that. And this
has to be in some connection with the general subject, no?
In broad sense, because I don't know what connection is. Sometimes I don't know. My students get that sense because it's the subject is for them, not for me.
Yeah.
So there's add many things that I would never add because I would not see connection, and they see connection in their mind.
It's good to find new connection. Yeah.
Yes, and that's like, for example, let me give a very interesting example that I was have absolutely no clue what they're talking about. They added a topic in cultural diversity class about chivalry. Chivalry, you know, and I had, what's chivalry? Like, what's it anything to do? And then I started figuring out, like, the person who proposed that, it was male student, asked, what do you mean? How? I was trying to prepare, like, how can facilitate that and so on and so forth. And then I suddenly think, wait a minute, he has idea. Why he can teach that? Like, he can lead that class. And she was leading class, and I've learned so much about that myself, and now I know what the connection is. But back then I didn't have any idea what the connection is. He helped me. Basically, he showed that he, as a young male student in the United States, completely disoriented about his gender role in relationship to females. Like, for example, should he open the door in front of his, like a woman, young woman or old woman, whatever, or not? Or is it will be sexism? Or is it will be impoliteness? Can he pay? So he brought so many interesting questions, and what we should teach little kids about that. And that becomes such an interesting topic. Because I'm just saying how much I have no clue about that he struggled with that. And it was such a wonderful topic in education. And I didn't know about that before he brought that. And Abram, you want to go ahead?
I had a question back for Ana again. It's to do with your choice of the term opinion, like people sharing opinions. This is just a thought that I had when you were giving that. It just seemed like a term from the wrong genre. I was thinking that the previous discussion after Eugene's presentation, that maybe something around voicedness, that they're trying to present themselves to the world in some way, not showing opinions, because when you're giving opinions, then you're opening them up to true and false. So that was a thought I had.
Yeah, very interesting that you're thinking of. It never occurred to me like that, because I wanted to bring the word opinion because it shows your attitude toward things. Like, you're claiming that you come from a certain point of view. You're expressly expressing your bias. You're not hiding your bias when you say opinion, and you're trying to justify why this bias is right or good or aesthetic or something like that. And so to me, it's very important part of having a voice to include your bias in that. It's for me, this is like that. I think that, I feel that, and because this and this and this, because I want to, whatever, I want to do more attention to these kinds of connections rather than these, or because I think this is ethically different than something else. But to me, opinion comes as part, important part of voice. To find your own opinion, to find your own stand, like where do you stand to certain things. So it's not just like encountering the world and the others unbiased as they are, but actually actively relating all the time and being aware and having other people aware that this is one way out of maybe different and maybe not better, but important, or important for what or why in this moment, all of that.
So I hear that now, but it's kind of like the different it's like a homologous term or something.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, like argument can mean different things, and opinion here, the opinion you have in mind. I'm not sure if you need a qualifier on it or something. I hear what you're saying and I see that, but it's just that I think that, so thinking about Sabi, right? He's trying to get kids to be able to address each other, be able to recognize each other and locate and occupy a position in the world, right? And I see that your vision of opinion works there, but I think that there's a certain game that we're all like practicing, like he calls it like schoolish, what is it? I don't know, the schoolish scrutiny of argument or something. And so we end up thinking of opinion in a different way to the way you mean. Like, I understand that opinion orients your voice in relation to others, but
and in relation to the world in general, you know, what you consider important or what you consider good or bad. But I see again the same issue kind of like mirrors the issues that you talked about, negative and positive freedom, where you have something that's always under scrutiny of others. And when you said like a opinion from the genre, like are you going to argue or not, for the sake of argument, or who is right and who is wrong, or opinion for the sake of exploring all the various alternatives and becoming aware of them, and also for the sake of knowing who you are yourself. Like like this kind of like taking responsibility for who you are. I'm going to sign under that. And it's always dialogic, critical dialogic, you know, deconstruction, whether you can start with, this is my opinion, and then start to change it in dialogue because you're deepening it.
Yeah. And one important thing that I would add to what Anna's saying, not having opinion is also very important. It's not necessarily negative. It's just like, remember, we talk about the bias, positive, negative, but another very important things for a live people, for a live organism to have that is to be neutral or indifferent about certain things. And not to say that like if somebody said, do you want red or blue this? I don't care. And that's important to say, I don't care. Rather than force to say, no, you have to choose between red and blue. Not even saying that you may be having green or yellow, that's another story, but just not caring about this issue. Like, for example, if people ask me how many angels can dance on the point of the needle, which is in Middle Ages led to the wars, for religious wars for a long time. But for me personally, I don't care. I'm not interested in answering question. I don't even understand the importance of that question. And I reject that, but it is part of this kind of opinion is very important because it's first orientation to the world in a way. Like my students sometimes tell me, not all, but some, like that sometimes I'm doing that voting about certain issues. And this is the first step. They told me that we become, by that voting, it gives them first step in the developing their orientation to this issue. And so I kind of ask you, for example, do you support equality in education, or do you support inequality in education? And we a little bit have this discussion, like what does mean equality, inequality, and they start seeing, wow, that's like before many of them have no opinion whatsoever about this issue. And also there are options, I don't care, or I don't know, which is different. I care, but I cannot distinguish between these two. Or I need more information.
There is an option like it's none of your business. But
yeah, there is also like it's a privacy thing. Like, I have opinion, but it's private. I don't want to publicly express that. So all this interesting possibility, but after that, the discussion, like why you choose that, if you want to talk about that, if you want to share, helps the people, wow, I didn't know that I have actually opinion, or I didn't know, maybe I didn't have opinion, and now I have opinion, and I start feeling it's important. The question is how critical, what Anna said, that's another process. Like, is it your opinion, or is it actually you're colonized by this through the society? It's not you who talks that, but it's kind of almost like a virus talks through you, societal virus talks from you, and you never even consider alternatives. And you might have very strong emotional standing on that, but it's actually on the close look, you say that I don't like it. I don't like even my emotions to be strong about that. And that's part of, in my view, educational process. That's why actually, if I may turn back to Anna and ask, how do you know that, or why you think that what you showed to us, that video about very dramatic, it may be very Bakhtinian dialogue, but is it educational? And please, and don't give me examples of their learning. For me, learning is not education necessarily. Of course, they've learned a lot, but that's not necessarily what's like. For that, everything in the life, you don't need to organize the whole thing. You're constantly learning something.
Right.
So how do you
I don't know. I put it there because I don't know. Is it educational? I wanted to learn from you what you think about it and in what ways. I don't have an answer to that myself. I think it is. It might be for some people educational, maybe not for all. And what does it mean educational?
No, for me, biggest question: how do you know that it's educational?
I just said I don't know.
And for me, based on Bakhtinian dialogue, educational is only when you ask people who participated in that.
Exactly.
What they think do they have any, first of all, was it important? And by the way, their answer can change during their life.
Exactly. Now, I try to get some people who I know from this movie. Today, they are much older than that.
Slightly older.
Yes, 30 years older. I asked one of them to tell me if he remembers that or not, and whether that meant anything for him. But unfortunately, he said he didn't have time to do that. So I don't know, and I don't know why he didn't do that. Was it time or not? I don't think that there was anything else than that. Yeah.
Education. I think there is a challenge in the questions about education is changing. If we are talking about education that's changing of something, and if by the way, opinion, there is some. Maybe you are familiar with the dual process theory about Klaczynski, I think, about the fact that as much as we're growing up, we use our analytical capabilities to strengthen our biases and to strengthen our fundamental basics, and not to challenge them. I mean, we are we are becoming more analytical, but we use it in order to strengthen and to support our old beliefs, and not to start thinking about them in a new way. And I think this is about education. If you are becoming a person who asks himself about and put questions about his old beliefs and all biases and ask himself again and again, and try to test it or to query it.
In my view, that's not necessarily educational, because it depends who's asking, who's making that judgment, what we're just making. That's important. And
the person himself has to be in charge, to take responsibility on his
exactly, including to disagree with you and whoever created that theory. And that's in my view crux of the interesting problem. What is education is part of education itself. That question, what is education?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why nobody can accept the.
There is dynamic answer.
Yeah, yes, right. But it's nobody but the student can bring that question and try to answer to that. I mean, other people can raise that question, but to answer that question is only answering by student, not by anybody else for the student.
We are students. As a teacher, we are students.
No, we are students, but we can only talk about ourselves in that sense.
Okay.
Yes, of course we are students. right. But we can only say, for me, education is this, and this, and this. What about you? And it is right now. I might change my mind.
If I change, maybe I get some educational process.
I also think that this kind of a view that we are trying to develop, especially also democratic education, is pluralistic and inclusive, in the sense that because only the person can decide for themselves whatever they decide is good for them, there is no right education or wrong education, or right answer or wrong answer. It's just like, and also for the same person, it could be different in different areas of life. Like in some areas of life, for me, education is just like, teach me how to quickly get to the product, or, like how to use this car. I don't want to know anything about combusting engine or computers in the car, just how to drive it. So
are you really?
It's more learning, it's not education.
Yeah. Are you really relativist, Anna?
No, I'm not relativist.
So, but you just say there is no right or wrong. That's really relativist.
Okay, no, it's relativist only if you're kind of looking from a bird's eye view. But from the personal point of view, there is absolutely no relativism, because you have biases and you know what's good for you, and you just accept that other people could be in contradiction with you or different from you. As an educator, and that's not relativist. It's not relativist, I think. It's very important to engage with each one of them seriously on for that what they are interested in, and in what way they.
But why engage in that if you know that you have your view and another one has their own views? Because
I think exactly in connection, in the meeting of different views, things start to come to the surface, to be deepened, to be critically deconstructed, and it gives a possibility, because we can only learn and be educated if we start to unpack what we now think. No, that's not true. We can learn without any unpacking. As you said, we will learn to speak their own native language without any unpacking. And that's true too, yes. Well, it's difficult, yes. Yes, we're falling into traps.
Eugene and Anna, I'm sorry, but I have to leave.
I know.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you.
Was very helpful.
We shall meet again, I think, about 2 days or something. Yeah.
Actually, tomorrow will be a presentation.
Tomorrow, yeah. Tomorrow we have something.
Tomorrow, yes.
Okay, see you later.
I'll see you tomorrow. And
Bye
for
bye.
people who don't know,
Bye. Thank you, Avram.
Yeah,
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay.
What's tomorrow?
Mark's presentation. Mark's.
No, it's not Mark. It's Brian. Anna.
Oh, yeah, Brian, not Mark. Brian.
It's a Brian presentation about a very interesting. That's his presentation. His kind of dissertational project about institutionalism, and he wants to in school, institutionalism in school, and he looks on that from Bakhtinian perspective on this, and he brings a very interesting case on which he was involved. And so that will be tomorrow. I think let me check the time, because I don't want to confuse you. 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock in Eastern time. No, one problem. This is what it became murky, but I think that at least I try to navigate that murky water. What about relativism is to assuming that there is a dualism, and that dualism, it's like almost like, you know how in social sciences people try to fight dualism to death. Cartesian dualism, this dualism, that dualism, and I think it's bad. First of all, fighting dualism is dualism itself, because everything is divided on dualistic and non-dualistic. It's useless. You just need to accept it, surrender. Dualism can be good and could be bad. And that's what can be, we should focus on that. So in this case, a dualism of the visionary approach, when you say, no, I think this is right, and everything else is wrong. And let me explain why. And second was pluralistic. And they, since it's dualistic approach, they go and they contradict each other, but they go together. It's like a little bit freedom of speech. And there is a very famous statement, dualistic statement, which I really like. It's attributed to Voltaire, and sounds like from a historical point of view, at least historians think that Voltaire never said that somebody else said that in 19th century, actually later than Voltaire, that, you know, about freedom of speech. I strongly disagree with your views, but I give my life for your freedom to express them. This is, in my view, that dualism is there. It's visionary. I have strong position, but at the same time, I really support your position, despite the fact that I strongly disagree with you. It's kind of live and let live. No, but it's not relativist. It's in very strong judgment.
Because it's about the right, and this being among other people as an equal, in a sense. You have a right, and in that sense, your uniqueness and your unique opinion or position is extremely valuable in general, but from my point of view, I don't agree with it.
Yeah. And by the way, if you look at the sphere of education, there is constantly fight going on between different educational philosophy for monopoly on education. Like they say, education must be like that, which means that the state or whoever has power, usually it's the state, should impose on everybody else my vision of education. And I think democratic education and Bakhtian, they both has almost like pregnant with this dualism and with pluralism. They have strong vision of what is right. At the same time, they're saying, I disagree with you, but you have right, and I will protect you. I will join the forces to fight for your freedom to realize that your vision for yourself and for people who likes vision like that. Despite the fact that I think I will criticize to the nail, tooth and nail about that. But that critique is not about elimination of you, but engaging with you and to finding the boundary of our truths, your truth and my truth. Not because they're relative, but because, again, this is like pluralistic things, that you have right to decide what's good for yourself.
And there are so many parts of that same quote that we used from Bakhtin, that it's a plurality of unmergeable consciousnesses.
Yeah.
They cannot merge, which means there is always going to be differences between them. A full agreement is not possible. We just
and not desirable. Not only not possible, but not desirable, because otherwise we stop being different, interested in each other. We consume other people. Because in this case, like, if I agree fully to Abram, I don't need Abram anymore, because I have now Abram inside of me. I don't need live Abram, because it's kind of redundancy. And sorry, Abram, to put you on the spot, because only the fact that I can never do that, that's, you constantly surprise me, you will be interesting person to me.
And see how different is that from either progressivist or traditional, where the student has to say exactly what you think. And if otherwise they are wrong or ignorant or disabled or something like that. So they have to collapse themselves into the accepted monologic opinion. They cannot stay unique.
But I don't know, this is the part where this is the tension that I have. The reason I said before about a different genre is because I actually think that, you can think of dialogue and dialectic as being mutually supportive. You can't have your own voice, your own position, unless you can engage with others. And then maybe you're shifting at times, you're jumping between a role of like, I need to understand your argument behind, like, what do you think is motivating your opinion? So that and if it's just like grounded on your personal experience, at which point I say, well, then that's like, there's the other concept of opinion. That's just your opinion. It's no longer backed by anything, right? But then there's the genre of opinion, or I don't want to say genre, because I was saying genre in terms of like speech genres, right? Like there's an aim to have dialogue with others in order to find our own voices. Like the goal of dialogue then would be to locate our own voice in order to somehow better find our place in relation to others in the world. And that itself would require us to like do some of the other work of understanding the other positions, critiquing them, being critical, and then comparing. And at that point, you may need to jump into well, just by jumping into the critical, you're jumping into some kind of discursive practice that's no longer just openly feeling or finding your voice. You need to, so I don't know. There's another way of thinking about it in terms of like distinctions between education and learning.
Let me tell you, yeah, that's critical approach, which is, I'm very sympathetic. But if you think deeply about that, the critical approach, that Socratic things, unexamined life is not worth living, implies that you need to find limitation for your own criticality. By asking question, maybe unexamined life is worth living, and maybe examined life sometimes is not worth living. And maybe, you see, and where is the, that famous paradox of center pillar, that when somebody asks a center pillar how it moves that 40 legs, center, it's
100 legs.
400 legs, how it puts 100 legs, the center pillar started thinking about that and couldn't move anymore, because this critical reflection completely destroys this this almost automatic things, that fluid, automatic, unreflective thing to do. So this criticality also has its own limitations, and it's embedded in criticality, which is, I really like that. So criticality has put its own limits, and say, you know what, I think that I'm not total. That total criticality is not critical. It stopped being critical.
But
that's why that can be totalitarian criticality doesn't exist because it kills itself. There is area that should be free from critical approach.
Right. And every time when we talk about the actually doing something, we have to come to the agreement, because otherwise you will not be able to do something with other people, like really, like building a building, creating a opera, or something that requires us to work together and collaborate in order to produce something together. We have to submit our criticality to some kind of like decision that now we are all agree about that, and then we can go about doing it. Dialogue is actually so different from all of that, because dialogue stops any doing. Because we kind of like, stop, I have a different point of view. You cannot then proceed working or doing or producing something. So dialogue is a step out of practical necessity to produce something or do something or make a decision about your next step. What's going to be next step? If you're constantly in dialogue, you cannot make the next step because you don't know what it's going to be.
I fully disagree with this. I think the dialogue is ends-oriented. It has to be ends-oriented in some way. Otherwise, there's no position taking.
Well, and this is what you may be different from Bakhtin. No, it's fine. It's just like for Bakhtin dialogue, it's unfinalizable. Yet you can temporarily come to something, but you know that it's very temporary. And you know that what Bakhtin was talking about, think about that seriously. He said that meaning is bottomless. Bottomless, it means you never reach bottom. And in real practice, we need to constantly reach bottoms. And this is the tension. Again, this is, in my view, another dualism, which is we have to accept, rather than to try to fight dialogue, Bakhtinian dialogue, from action, or action from Bakhtinian dialogue. I think we have to live. This is another tension that we have to live and compromise. So when we prioritize Bakhtinian dialogue and when we prioritize action and our deeds, because we just need to, and we know that we're taking meaning, certain meanings, and we know that it's a lot of them faulty, and we don't even know how faulty it is, but we have to act. We cannot stand and continue dialoguing about that because it's bottomless.
Turtles all the way down.
Yeah, there is no, you're just thinking there. And it's interesting thinking, no question about that. You get high almost of that thinking there, but you stop acting and you stop living in a way. Because dialogue, in a way, it's a step out of the life. Remember that he said that dialogue is humanizing life, which means it's a step out of the life.
I don't know. I'm just.
It's mind-boggling, but it is really mind-boggling, but very interesting. But we still need it to go back to life after any kind of portion of the dialogue with some new ways of thinking. And so that's why dialogue can be used instrumentally, because it leads to new points of realization on which you can now act in a different way.
Well, by the way, what we're discussing is so important in education. Let me provide some tough educational problems of what we're discussing, so it will make it less esoteric. Like, for example, would you, if you have deep dilemma, would you try to bring voices of different approaches to that dilemma? Of course you will. Okay, and I'm using a US example. If you're discussing racism, would you invite speakers from KKK, from this racist, super racist group, so they will present and you better understand their views to your class or not? Is it a good idea? For example, if you studying Holocaust, would you invite fascists and anti-Semites and racists to present their views on this Holocaust? By the way, they're direct participants of that. They're not just esoteric kind of people. They're important. Should their voices be heard in this case? And again, some people say yes, some people no, but it's a part of that. Or should you give voice of your students who are homophobic in the presence of homosexual students there? From educational point of view. From educational point of view.
Just bring me back to like the pragmatic, like you're
but not only pragmatic,
still
but
has their ends.
Yeah, it's pragmatic and educational. They're going together, like colliding with each other, and you specifically on educational territory. You're not just. It's easy to prioritize outside of educational territory, but this is educational territory. And it's not that easy answer. Like, for example, Anna and I, we attended a private Jewish school. It's a secular Jewish school, but it was a private school, very progressive, where Jewish students study Mein Kampf, Hitler's work, Mein Kampf.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so, but would they invite anti-Semite to talk? Rather, you know,
no, of course. But I mean,
it's almost like
there's definitely a weighing of the different.
Exactly.
Right?
In my view, this is such an important topics. It's not esoteric when we're discussing this, that dialogue versus action or pragmatic you're talking about. And pragmatic is always monologic by default, because you need to impose that's action. You're imposing certain things on the world. It's not like, okay, but you can consider other one and another one and another one. No, there will be only one. And history does not, it doesn't have reverse. Time is going one way.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot take it back.
Like when you're planning, let's say to make a garment, and they say measure, and plan before you cut. Once you cut, decision is irreversible. Yep. In dialogue, everything has to be still reversible, and because you have to take this into account or that, or suddenly completely change, you know, everything. And once for decisions, you have to finish that and say, okay.
You need to finalize, and dialogue inherently unfinalizable, but you need to monologically finalize that.
Yeah,
See,
but I disagree. I mean, what I mean by pragmatic, I'm thinking Deweyan, ends in view, you know, like, of course it goes further, like, but there's just some dimension of even dialogue. If you have a voice, then you're interpreting the world, you're seeing things through perspective, and it's pragmatic in that sense of the conversation is oriented in a direction, it's directed, right? It's not directionless. It has many different directions that go in all different ways. And part of what I understand dialogue to be doing, if we're talking about voices and understanding one's position in relation to others in a dynamic system, is coming to terms with what that is. So then you have at least one goal of dialogue, right? Which is an end, is like, it might be a dynamic, constantly evolving end, but like in the Deweyan sense of an end in view, you're trying, and this would be something that you could offer educators to, like, you know, one reason to do this practice is because we need people to get used to the ambiguity and the dynamic quality of this. So that's like that's one capability or something, but they're kind of trying to discover who they are, you know. So I was going to bring like education versus learning, where education then would be something like coming to terms with who you are in the world in relation to others and your perspective.
But Abram, but it's never-ending process.
Well, it does end because we all die.
No, we die, but we know we're present when we die. This is what Bakhtinian was arguing, actually. Death doesn't exist to us. It exists for other people. We never die in that sense. We know from other people, observing other people, that other people die. We can project on us, but we never died for ourselves.
It's really
impossible. Impossible to be a witness of your own death, because in order to witness, you need to step out of that, which is because we died. It's impossible. That's why he actually compares Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, and he said, well, Dostoevsky monologist, he always portrayed person's death, and from the person's eye, and from Dostoevsky, he never described person's death. from person's eyes, because it's impossible. Until you have consciousness, you're not dead. So you don't have death. Death is not out of your reality. Like a birth, he said, we don't have birth. We were never present at our birth because we were not conscious back then. And we don't know our death. We don't know our birth. That's what it's unfinalizable. We in unfinalizability. Other people finalize us constantly. We can partially finalize ourselves, but only partially.
Right. So long as consciousness doesn't survive death.
Yeah. And as soon as it survives, it becomes already, it's still.
It's so interesting to know. I can't wait to find that.
But I do like this point. I mean, I've heard that point iterated like in other contexts, but in this context, the idea that you don't experience your own death also means that you don't experience your own story, right?
Yeah.
Because your story is only for other people, which is really strange, which puts another spin on dialogue or dialogism, or like our being in the world for others and what it means to be
and that's part of that, all these stories, this is narrative approach. But this is interesting question, how narrative approach different from dialogic approach. What does it mean narrative? Narrative is finalization, and which is kind of, if it's temporary and partial, it's fine. But that's the point. The consciousness never can be put in the story. Your own consciousness. I'm not talking about consciousness of other people. Of course, with other people, we can do whatever we want. We can put them in the boxes and they can be fine. From your point of view, of course. From their point of view, they will be not fine. Until they die. After they die, that's why there is no dialogue with the text. Because that's dead people already dead. So like Bakhtin, I can put in the box and he cannot get out of it.
You can do whatever you want with it.
And we can do whatever I want with that. Yeah. But people themselves resist narration about their own life. They know that it's not like whatever I say about myself, I'm professor, father, I'm male, everything sounds funny to me. Because, yeah, that's true, kind of. Mm-hmm. I'm not always professor, I'm not always father, I'm not always male, I'm always because I know that I'm escaping all the time. It's like boxes from which I can easily escape. And they can be useful boxes, by the way, in order to, for example, professor gave me jobs. So it can be useful, I can manipulate with them, but I know that it's not me deeply down. It's kind of, it's my decoration that I can use or abuse, or somebody can abuse them, or somebody can be like, it can be very painful, that decoration, but it is decoration, it's not me. But that's that's how I experienced that. That's why narrative approach is very limited to the, that's why narrative is not a voice, it's not equal to voice. The story that I'm telling to myself is not voice. The voice is doing, that's the focus on the voice, not on the story. Mm-hmm. It's about who is talking, how is talking, but not, yes, what choosing to talk as well, but not this, because the story become it, and the voice is I.
Unfortunately,
the I has a chronotopical like range. It has a duration of some kind. Every eye is not just a static snapshot, you know.
Yeah.
It's informed by a history that it's more or less aware of.
Sure.
It's like, you know, the eye is this extended.
No, that's true. On the other hand, it's not to reduce to that. It's material for making something interesting. Like, yes, I speak Russian, I speak English, that's I. This is like defining me to some degree. But what does it define? It's defining materials of what I can work with. For example, right now I cannot work with Chinese. I cannot voice myself in Chinese. You see, I cannot. Maybe in future I can, but now I cannot. And so this is kind of, but this is only defining what I'm capable of. what materials, not capable, because I can transcend even that, but what's available materials for me right now. And that's important. It's important that we're living in that particular historical time, in the particular place, with particular people, and doing but this is sociocultural. We should, that sociocultural approach creates sometimes prison for us, prison, like, oh, that's who we are. No, we are not. This is just our instrumentarium with what we can work. Yes, but the fact that, for example, we are in that particular time and not in another, that instrumentarium can be very different. But I'm still taking responsibility for that. That's what Bakhtin was talking about, with that I do not have alibi in being. And maybe that's a very important ethical term or moral point about I don't have alibi in being. Exactly that. I cannot explain myself only through the fact that I'm a father, that I'm a Jew, that I'm this, I'm that, and because of that, I've done something. No.
No. Finally, you are the you outside.
I did with that, and for that, I'm taking responsibility. So my being cannot excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
It can help to understand me a little bit and my tensions and my problems, whatever, but it cannot excuse me.
But see, this being that he says alibi in being, this is the being as a human. On that level that we're talking about voice. It's not being as a physical object.
No, I think it is part of that. There is no alibi in being. That's alibi in being is physical object as well. It's a physical, like for example, let me give the simple ethical example. I turn and I can see that there is a person behind me. We just a collision of physical body, but I'm still taking responsibility for that.
You misunderstood. It's what you do with that, exactly. So you don't have alibi in being. Being does not give you excuse as a human that you didn't, on the level of your consciousness, do something or take a stand in a certain way.
Yeah.
The life it overcame you and not you, the life.
Even in the situation.
Can I just ask, is that in the philosophy of an act or is that in the
philosophy of an act?
Yes. Yeah.
Or what else, Abram, you want to ask?
Or if it was in the late notes or something.
He unfortunately never returned to that, and for some strange reason he didn't like that book. I have suspicion why he didn't like that, but he's dead.
I really like that one, nice and small.
But no. By the way, do you know that's very funny? It's only middle of the book. We don't know what was how it started and how it's ended. And we don't know the title of that either.
Or by something. It was destroyed for some reason, either mice or some.
No, it's not. It's kind of what? It's I think mice and rats eat inside of it. It was like a big park, so it's inside, and the water destroyed from the top of that. So
he didn't smoke that one.
No, he didn't. But he disliked that. My hypothesis why he disliked it, it's the only text that it was written and not being grounded in anything, in literacy. And I think this is my hypothesis, I may be completely wrong. And I think he very much disliked, almost aesthetically, non-grounded texts. And he did it himself.
Right? It's very grounded in his reading of Kant.
Yeah, and he didn't. Well, not exactly. It's between the lines. I think if he did really focus on Kant,
he wants an abstract architectonic, right?
Yeah, but you see, he didn't give juicy examples. Like he's doing that for all his other writing. There is no other writing like that. Even pedagogical writing, it was very, very grounded. He looks like, for me, maybe again, this is my hypothesis, could be completely wrong. So please do not take that. But my suspicion is that he was aesthetically grounded person. That's why he constantly say he philosopher. Some people think, well, he was philosopher, but he lived under Stalinist totalitarianism. And that's why he chose literacy, because he kind of mask like philosophical issues. I disagree with that. I think he wanted to philosophize within particular material. And for him, he loved literacy, and that's particular material was
in literature or
literature. No,
yeah,
literature. I'm sorry,
like
literature.
Walter Benjamin or something like that, right?
Yeah, he loved that, and he wanted to be grounded. He doesn't want to do this, what he calls theoretism, blah, 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 and you don't even understand why you're saying that. And in that book, if you read that, it is like in the genre of philosophical essay without grounded, not being grounded. It's not even grounded like from philosophical, like he's not bringing quotes from the Kant, for example. You kind of, between the lines, you understand that probably he addressing Kant heavily, but maybe some other people. But you don't see that in very clear, like how he would do it in all other work when he considered literature. When he brings a lot of theoretical concept, but they always will be grounded. Like he starts with chronotope, and then he considers chronotope of Greek novel, and then like adventure novel, and then you see it will be in material. And this is the only text that doesn't have this material. Even philosophical material is not have. It's not grounded, and that's my explanation why he hated that book.
It's the anti-Bakhtinian.
Yeah, he even refused to tell what was the title of that book.
Amazing.
So, you know, the title of the book given by his disciples, because they couldn't get any, and he just refused, and they tried many, many times, please. And he was very much against publishing it. Huh. He said, it's not important, just, he was very, very sorry that it was, you know, he didn't find it, they found it. They went to his attic and found this thing. And they asked him, what's that? And he said, nothing. Just threw it away. Some garbage.
Published after he died, or was it published after he died?
Yes, it was published after he died. But that's another story. It's not because it was very difficult to publish in Soviet Union anything. It was published because it was
I mean, could they publish it when he was alive and didn't want to publish it?
I don't know, but they didn't have, they were not tempting. I think they would try to do something like that, but I don't know whether or not they would succeed. He gave them, nevertheless, he gave them full power of authority or whatever to do with all his texts whatever they want. So it was, they published at his behalf. But it's very interesting to know story that particular manuscript, like was he just forgetting that he didn't like that and some kind of gave them, you know, blank permission to do that, or what? I don't know. Or maybe they convinced him that it's okay to publish it. I don't know about that story, but it's interesting.
I like his stories.
Yeah.
Fascinating human being.
And for me, this is a terrifically important book. Even the fact that we don't even know what's beginning and what's his conclusions. Maybe we're completely wrong. Maybe he actually at the end turns things upside down and arguing against that. Who knows?
It's exactly what one should not do.
We only have middle, and but he was very stubborn. And they asked him how it started, how it's ended, what's the title? Silence. He said, no, don't want to talk about that. And he was not like that with any of his other writings. Like all other writings were fine, but not that one. Again, this is my hypothesis. Why?
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. But I think it's very important to kind of like dig more into what the relational ethical aspects are in meaning making. And I think Sabe, or you say Sabi, however you, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Very interesting kind of like chip there. very interesting, important kind of conceptualization of what, at least for me.
And also it brings for me questions, again, back questions, how much it's good to be Bakhtinian and how much to deviate from that, because—
And when, yes.
And when, because I think this presencing can be very, who was talking with whom? Is it Brian who said that confessional?
Yes.
You almost constantly confess to other people about yourself. And sometimes it's good, but sometimes it could be very oppressive as well, especially when the teacher almost like forcing you to do that.
It's kind of, we kind of talk about similar things or around about that when you kind of like succeed to say something that would inform another person about their own views and opinions, but where they have no obligation to, they can hide, but it's up to them to then make decisions. You know, sometimes that's important because it's so painful that, or inappropriate, or in some ways impossible to bring it into the public, but you still kind of like must in a way confront somebody in such a way that they can actually even begin to think about it. And then you have these kind of like possibilities to do something in a way like they're saying in Serbian, like a saying about family, like I'm like a mother-in-law is having a grudge with her daughter, but actually she is telling her daughter-in-law what's wrong with her, but kind of like in a different argument. The other was observing, but can take her own conclusions from that.
But let me give another example, much more educational, that I actually faced. And again, there are many examples of that when people very legitimately don't want to present. In this case, physically, not just, they don't want to be part of the dialogue despite that they initiated it. Let me give an example. Again, I was teaching this cultural diversity class, and one of the students of mine added a new topic for our curriculum map list. And the topic was issue of suicide and how to approach that in education, issue of suicide. And the students, at some point, her peers of that female student, they chose that topic. And so, okay, good. And I was actually contacting her. You know, you designed that topic, like do you want to teach that class, or do you want me to do that? What's your ideas, and so on and so forth. And she replied to me, sorry, I cannot discuss with you. Even more, I'm not planning to come to the class. And I asked her why. And she said, I'm it's too close to my, I don't want to discuss with you, but it's very close to home to me. I just cannot talk, but I'm extremely happy that my peers decided that this topic is important. And fortunately, that will be much better for future students. And fortunately, it was not good for me at all. But I cannot talk about that and can't discuss. So I said, of course, sure, you don't need to come. But can I share our conversation that we just had with your classmates? And she said, sure, please share that. It's actually a very good idea to share that. So we discussed that as well. But you see, she doesn't want to be present. like she doesn't want to bring herself to that in topic, despite the fact that she brought it. But it's such an interesting case when the presencing was not okay, although dialogue was okay.
Yes, interesting, very interesting. Very
yeah. And she actually told me that she managed herself, push herself to listen to us, because we recorded that, and she listened to that. And she said, I couldn't listen to the whole thing because sometimes I skipped because I couldn't just handle emotionally, but I listened a little bit. And she said, I'm so appreciative that my peers discuss that and realize importance and very good, but unfortunately I cannot come too close to that.
Mhm. So
Yeah.
there is still a lot for us to research there and to think
Yeah.
and to conceptualize.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, wow, we had 3.5 hours, right? Is it
Yeah.
three?
I don't know,
Oh, terrific.
Mariam,
Thanks
Vida,
for-
you didn't say much, but I hope you have questions for yourself.
And if you want to share something, feel free to do it now or not. It's up to you. Thanks a lot for coming, and thanks Abram and Anna and Vida and Mariam
Thank you.
and Victor and other people who came to our discussion.
Thank you for putting it on, you guys. This was really a good 3.5 hours spent.
Thank you. It's mutual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mutual.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, Vida. Bye, Mariam.
Bye.